Chapter 440. He didn't expect that Nangong Wan would actually place the teleportation array in Owner Bu's store. Nangong Wuk's body was covered in blood, and his flesh was a mess. His high-spirited appearance had long disappeared, and he was in a sorry state. He gasped for breath, and his chest heaved up and down like a bellows. From time to time, he would cough out a few mouthfuls of blood. Bufang's brows twitched. What happened? Why did Nangong Wuk become so miserable? Old Bu, do you have anything to eat? I'm starving. Nangong Wuk trembled as he tried to crawl up from the ground. However, he suddenly lost all his strength and fell back onto the ground. His face slightly darkened. Nangong Wuk smiled and didn't bother to crawl anymore. He raised his head and said to Bufang, "This was too miserable." His true energy was completely chaotic, and there were countless hidden injuries in his body. The metal cross was binding him, and the chain had pierced through his body, sealing his cultivation. "Who did you offend? Why are you so ruthless?" Bufang said. He walked over and helped Nangong Wuk up from the ground. He stirred his true energy and tugged at the ice-cold chain, but he discovered that he couldn't move it at all. Bufang twitched his brows. He was slightly surprised that the chain was actually quite strong. "Don't waste your strength. This chain is made of Millennium Dark Steel, and it is specially used to seal the cultivation of Divine Physique Echelon experts. It is incomparably strong. You haven't even reached the Divine Physique Echelon, so how can you break this chain?" Nangong Wuk smiled helplessly. Bufang stopped what he was doing and glanced at him. Green smoke curled around his hand, and suddenly, the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. There was nothing that the dragon bone kitchen knife couldn't cut. However, just as he was about to cut the chain, the golden Xiaopi, who was lying on his shoulder, waved its sickle claws and cut the chain as easily as cutting tofu. Bufang was stunned, and so was Nangong Wuk. Xiaopi snorted and waved its two sickle claws, showing off to Bufang. Nangong Wuk's eyes immediately lit up. This little toy was actually so awesome? It could even cut through a mysterious iron chain. It was simply an essential tool for picking locks when traveling. Xiaopi returned to Bufang's shoulder and lay there quietly. Bufang touched the latter's carapace, and Xiaopi closed its compound eyes comfortably. After the chain was broken, Bufang helped Nangong Wuk pull it out of his body inch by inch. The pain caused Nangong Wuk to suck in a breath of cold air. "Ouch, that hurts!" The metal cross was finally removed from Nangong Wuk's body. Nangong Wuk felt his whole body relax. He closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the ground. He took out a bottle of elixirs from his spatial spirit tool and poured them into his mouth, as though they were free. Kachi kachi. Dense spiritual energy emitted from the elixirs. "Old Bu, make me a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup," Nangong Wuk mumbled. "Today's Buddha jumps over the wall soup has been sold out," Bufang calmly said. "Don't. Your Buddha jumps over the wall soup can definitely help me recover quickly. Look at how pitiful I am." Nangong Wuk's blood-stained face revealed a trace of grievance. Bufang glanced at him and remained unmoved. "I already said that today's Buddha jumps over the wall soup has been sold out. You don't need to ask anymore." After saying that, Bufang turned around and walked toward the kitchen. "I will make you a dish that can help you recover quickly. However, you will still have to pay with crystals." Shortly after, Bufang's voice drifted out from the kitchen. Nangong Wuk immediately grinned. In order to eat Bufang's dishes, Nangong Wuk didn't bring anything else, but he did bring a lot of crystals. Hence, he immediately agreed to it. Nangong Wuk's escape caused an uproar in the dungeon. The guard didn't understand how Nangong Wuk escaped, so he could only report it to the Great Elder. After rushing out of the dungeon, the guard informed the Great Elder, Nangong Xuanhe. Nangong Wuk escaped? Nangong Xianying slightly raised his brows when he heard the guard's report. That lassie really had some tricks up her sleeves. As he thought of this, Nangong Xianying's expression became even colder. Big brother. I will go and capture that kid, Nangong Xianying said. This time, Nangong Wuk's escape was mainly due to him. Nangong Xuanhe looked at him and nodded his head. Fine. If you really can't capture him, then just kill him, Nangong Xuanhe said. Nangong Xianying nodded his head and turned around, walking toward the exit. When he reached the exit, Nangong Xianying squinted his eyes and raised his head. He saw two people, who were wrapped in blood-red robes. Who were they? Nangong Xianying's heart shuddered. He felt an extremely terrifying aura coming from those two people. That aura made him feel slightly uncomfortable. Those two people, as if they sensed Nangong Xianying's gaze, one of the people wrapped in blood-red robes raised his head, and his ice-cold gaze collided with Nangong Xianying's. Nangong Xianying's heart skipped a beat, and the blood in his body started to boil uncontrollably. Terrifying. Too terrifying. Nangong Xianying took a deep breath and nodded his head at that person. He then turned around and left the Nangong family. Nangong Xuanhe walked out of the house with a warm smile on his face and welcomed those two people. Search the entire city. Remember, don't miss a single corner. You must find Nangong Wuk. Nangong Xianying coldly instructed his subordinate. Then, his subordinates rushed into the Heavenly Mist City and started searching for Nangong Wuk. Nangong Xianying, who had a gloomy expression on his face, slowly walked on the main street of the Heavenly Mist City. In the Lin family's building, the higher-ups of the Lin family and the experts of the Wind and Thunder Pavilion stood together and looked at the group of people from the Nangong family. They couldn't help but laugh. Young Master Xiao, the Nangong family is in chaos now. The Nangong family will definitely be defeated in the Secret Realm selection in 3 days. The head of the Lin family, Lin Kai, said with a smile. Xiao Chongyun calmly looked at the Heavenly Mist City beneath him and gently nodded his head. That's only natural. If the Nangong family doesn't have anyone to help us, then the quota for the Heavenly Mist City will be greatly reduced. In the future, your Lin family will be able to gain the upper hand. That's right. Everyone is happy. Young Master Xiao can enter the Secret Realm to find what he wants, and my Lin clan can suppress the Nangong clan. It's a win-win situation. Lin Kai laughed out loud. Xiao Chongyun picked up a glass of wine, took a sip, and nodded gently. The same thing was happening in the Zhang family's building. However, compared to the gentle Xiao Chongyun, the experts of the puppet sect were much colder and more difficult to get along with. However, their goals were the same and they were rather harmonious. Clap clap. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife spun rapidly in Bu Fang's hand. He twirled the knife in his hand and patted the huge supreme mantis prawn on the chopping board. After that, Bu Fang sliced the prawn meat on the chopping board. The transparent prawn meat was as thin as a cicada's wings. Each and every line on the prawn meat was very distinct, and they were like beautiful flowers that dazzled the eyes of those who looked at them. The sliced prawn meat was placed on a plate, and it looked like a splendid flower. Bu Fang placed the prawn meat into a steamer basket and started to steam it. Bu Fang covered the top of the steamer basket with his hand and sensed the flow of spirit energy within it. On the other side, he started to mix the sauce. He took out the abyssal chili sauce and poured half a spoonful into a blue and white porcelain bowl. After that, he poured a cup of Ice Heart jade urn wine into it and stirred it evenly. A faint fragrance wafted out. Bu Fang opened his mouth and spouted a small ball of golden flames. The 10,000 bestial flame danced on his palm. Bu Fang swallowed the ball of flames and jumped into the blue and white porcelain bowl. In an instant, the flames blazed brightly, and with a rumbling sound, waves of heat rolled out. A dense, spicy smell, accompanied by a thick fragrance, permeated the air. After adding other seasonings, he cut a small piece of blood crown and put it into the sauce. That piece of blood crown instantly turned into spirit energy and permeated the sauce. A bowl of Bu Fang's secret chili sauce was completed. The taste of this sauce was a little sour and a little spicy. Go-go-go, thick steam rose from the steamer basket, and it was accompanied by surging spirit energy. This was the meat of a supreme beast, and the spirit energy contained within it was extremely dense. Moreover, the supreme mantis prawn meat had a pretty good effect in replenishing spirit energy. Most of the spirit energy within the prawn meat was retained. After being steamed by Bufang, it became even more sparkling and translucent. It was too beautiful to behold. The plate of prawn meat bloomed like a flower, and a bowl of sour and spicy sauce was placed on top of it. Bufang's special dish was completed. When Nangong Wuk, who was sitting cross-legged and recovering, walked out of the kitchen while carrying the fresh prawn meat, his nose couldn't help but twitch. He opened his eyes and looked at the prawn meat in Bufang's hand. His eyes instantly lit up. After a short period of recovery, the chaotic true energy within his body had been smoothed out. However, this didn't mean that his injuries had recovered. This could only prevent his injuries from worsening. What kind of dish is this? It isn't on the menu. Nangong Wuk was extremely curious. There are many dishes that aren't on the menu, Bufang calmly replied. He pulled a chair and sat opposite Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk impatiently picked up a piece of sparkling and translucent prawn meat and dipped it in the sauce, causing the prawn meat to become slightly rosy. Steam spread out from the rosy prawn meat, and it was extremely pleasing to the eye. Nangong Wuk stuffed the prawn meat into his mouth. Oh, Nangong Wuk's eyes widened. He took a deep breath and chewed the prawn meat in his mouth. The prawn meat was bouncy and had a good texture. The most important part was the sauce. It was extremely sour and spicy, and its spiciness caused all the pores on his body to open up. His blood and energy surged. After eating a piece of prawn meat, he actually started to sweat. The surging essence energy flowed into his stomach through the prawn meat and was absorbed by him. It was so refreshing. Nangong Wuk felt his strength continuously recovering. The essence energy that this bowl of dish provided him was exactly what he needed. Although he used the meat of a supreme beast, which wasn't as nutritious, Nangong Wuk was still satisfied. Of course, if he could get his hands on Old Qian's 8 treasures chicken and let Owner Bu cook it with his special method, the taste would definitely be delicious. When Bufang saw Nangong Wuk eating happily, the corners of his mouth curled upwards. When a customer was eating happily as a chef, he was naturally happy as well. All of a sudden, when Nangong Wuk was eating happily, suddenly, a series of knocking sounds came from the store's bronze door. Knock, knock, knock. Open the door. Quickly open the door. The Nangong family is searching for a criminal. Chapter 441. Quickly open the door. The Nangong family wants to arrest a criminal. The violent banging on the door made the restaurant's door rumble. Bufang furrowed his brows in displeasure and turned his head to look at Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk didn't mind. He picked up a piece of piping hot prawn meat, dipped it in the chili sauce, and stuffed it into his mouth. That's right. The criminal they want to arrest is me. While chewing the prawn meat, Nangong Wuk mumbled. The Nangong family wanted to arrest the Nangong family's young master? Bufang furrowed his brows. When he thought about how Nangong Wuk was covered in blood, he couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. Nangong Wuk picked up another piece of prawn meat. He seemed to have sensed Bufang's playful gaze and sighed. While eating the prawn meat, he told Bufang everything that had happened. Bufang leaned against the chair and listened to Nangong Wuk calmly. His brows furrowed even more. He didn't expect that the Nangong family's betrayal would cause this. Nangong Wuk's miserable appearance made Bufang's heart tremble. As expected, the people who were familiar with him were the most ruthless. Eat slowly. Don't worry about them. Bufang didn't open the door. He was too lazy to do so. He just calmly told Nangong Wuk to continue eating the prawn meat. This prawn meat could help him recover his energy and strength at a faster rate. The people outside also noticed that something was amiss. Why didn't the restaurant's door open? At first, it could be because the owner was sleeping, but their movements were so loud and their voices were so loud that the door was almost broken by them. How could the boss not wake up yet? It was obvious that something was amiss. Was the owner feeling guilty? Guilty? Why was he feeling guilty? Could it be that Nangong Wook was really inside? That's right. It was definitely the case. When the Nangong family's people thought of this, they became excited. The sounds of them knocking on the door became more intense. When Nangong Wook dipped the last piece of prawn meat into the sauce and put it into his mouth, he chewed it. He could not help but heave a sigh of relief. After Nangong Wook ate this dish, the external injuries on his body were almost healed, and the true energy cyclone within his body was also surging. Although the heaven and earth obsidian flame had been extracted, he was still severely injured. However, at the very least, Nangong Wook had survived this tribulation. "Are you done?" Bufong asked. Nangong Wook leaned against the chair and nodded. Then, Bufong stood up and walked toward the door. The knocking sounds outside the door grew louder and louder. "If you don't open the door, we're going to break the door." The Nangong family members outside the door began to roar and threaten. It was obvious that Nangong Wook was most likely staying in the store. Boom! There seemed to be a surge of Jinshi outside the door. In the next moment, a rapid impact sound resounded. Creak! The bronze gate was slowly opened by Bufong. Outside the door, the two Supreme Being experts raised their true chi and prepared to charge into the store. The sudden opening of the store made the two Supreme Beings somewhat embarrassed. However, the Nangong family's members quickly entered the store. They had been suspicious of the store for a long time. "Why did you open the door so late?" A Supreme Being glared at Bufong, his eyes filled with coldness. Bufong shot him a glance and expressionlessly turned around and walked into the store. That Supreme Being was instantly enraged. This guy actually dared to ignore him. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. He saw a figure leaning against a chair and looking at him with a playful smile. Nangong Wook. At this moment, everyone was stupefied. The leader of the Supreme Beings even let out a cry of alarm. He had finally found him. He was indeed in the store. After letting out a cry of alarm, the Supreme Being was overjoyed. Looking at Nangong Wook's badly mutilated appearance, the Supreme Being felt as though he had just gotten lucky. As long as he could capture this guy, he would be able to obtain the Nangong family's reward. That reward might even allow him to break through to the divine physique echelon. As for whether or not he could capture Nangong Wook, this wasn't within the scope of his concern. Nangong Wook had already been stripped of his heaven and earth obsidian flame. He was no longer the high and mighty Nangong Wook from before. His badly mutilated body and his cultivation had also collapsed. How could he be a match for him? This Supreme Being was extremely confident. As for the store's owner, he was merely an 8th-grade war god. This kind of ant could be easily crushed to death. There was no need to fear him. The store's owner couldn't be a hindrance to him. The surrounding Nangong family members also had the same reaction. They looked at Nangong Wook with greedy eyes. Buzz, a purple radiance flickered. Xiao Bai's body slowly walked out of the kitchen and landed beside Bufong. "Hey, Lord Bai, you don't have to do anything. I will deal with these people." Nangong Wook glanced at Xiao Bai and said with a smile. Then, he stood up and stretched his body. His bones emitted cracking sounds. The sound was unceasing. Nangong Wook ran his fingers through his red hair. His gaze toward the Nangong family members gradually became ice-cold. Nangong Wook remembered many of their faces. Many of the people who had tortured him were among them. It was time to settle the score. Attack together. Capture Nangong Wook for me. Don't let him escape, the leading Supreme Being shouted. Everyone's aura rose sharply as they stared at Nangong Wook crazily. The tip of Nangong Wook's foot lightly touched the ground. His figure instantly dashed out at high speed. A sonic boom resounded, bringing along a gale. Nangong Wook appeared in front of the two Supreme Beings. He raised his ice-cold eyes and collided with the gazes of the two supreme beings. His eyes, which were filled with killing intent, caused the hearts of the two supreme beings to turn cold. Nangong Wook raised his hand and grabbed the collars of the two supreme beings. His speed didn't decrease as he continued dashing out of the store. Boom! 2 explosions resounded. The two supreme beings were ruthlessly thrown out by Nangong Wook. They crashed into 2 elixir stores. "You guys can't be forgiven," Nangong Wook said coldly. The aura emitted from his body became even colder. The others also dashed out of the store and looked at Nangong Wook in fear. The two supreme beings struggled to get up from the ground. They coughed up blood, but they laughed crazily. "Ha ha! You are no longer the Nangong Wook of the past. You are so weak." Crazed roars resounded. One of the supreme beings, who was brimming with true energy, unleashed a fist technique. He charged at Nangong Wook with killing intent. This was the fist technique of the Nangong family. It was extremely powerful. Nangong Wook sneered. "That's right. Without the heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 9 Hell King flame, his strength had decreased greatly. Moreover, because he was seriously injured, his battle prowess had decreased greatly. However, he was still a divine physique echelon expert. With the nourishment of Onurbu's prawn meat, he had recovered a lot of his cultivation. Dealing with two supreme beings was still very easy." Bang! His aura surged out, and it seemed as if there was an invisible ice-cold chain floating behind him. Nangong Wook moved once again. He surpassed the speed of sound, and a sonic boom resounded in everyone's ears. With a bang, an explosion resounded. The face of the supreme being who unleashed the fist technique became distorted. He was ruthlessly smashed into the ground by Nangong Wook. His true energy turned into a cannonball and exploded. That supreme being let out a miserable howl, and his whole body exploded. Nangong Wook stamped his foot on the ground, and his body soared into the sky. He charged at the other supreme being. His true energy turned into a blade that was as thin as a cicada's wing, and it instantly sliced through the air. A head soared into the sky, and a pillar of blood soared into the sky. The silly Nangong Wook, when he became indifferent, was filled with killing intent. After killing the two supreme beings, Nangong Wook's gaze fell on the other disciples. These people, all of them had betrayed the Nangong family. All of them deserved to die. Nangong Wook's hair fluttered in the wind, and his face, which was covered by blood, seemed even more terrifying. Bang! The true energy beneath his feet exploded, and his body shot out like a gust of wind. The disciples of the Nangong family were instantly terrified. Wasn't it said that Nangong Wook was seriously injured, and that he didn't even have 1/10 of his strength? That was a lie. How could he be seriously injured? Poochie! Poochie! Outside the store, the yellow sand was dyed with blood. The blood on the ground was like a puddle, and it slowly flowed out. Nangong Wook was like a wolf that had entered a flock of sheep, and his killing intent pervaded the air. All of a sudden, an explosive roar came from afar, and a wave of heaven and earth's pressure approached at an extremely fast speed. A figure appeared, and it seemed as though it was tearing the sky apart. This figure had an imposing appearance, and a powerful aura surged from his body. Behind him, there was a chain that shook unceasingly. Nangong Wook killed the last disciple, and his face was covered with blood. Only then did he raise his head and look at the figure. "Nangong Ching, you also want to kill me?" Nangong Wook's voice unexpectedly became somewhat hoarse. "You are now a criminal of the Nangong family. If I, Nangong Ching, don't kill you, who should I kill?" The man smiled slightly, and he looked at Nangong Wook with a playful gaze. His eyes were filled with excitement. "Nangong Wook, the heaven's proud son, Nangong Wook. Even you would have such a day." Nangong Wook threw away the corpse in his hand, stood up, and took a deep breath. Pitter-patter, it was unknown when dark clouds covered the sky, and the pitter-patter of rain fell from the sky. In just a short while, the rain became heavier. Nangong Ching stood proudly in the sky, and he used a light barrier to block the rain from falling on him. He looked extremely carefree. Nangong Wuk didn't bother to block it, and he allowed the ice-cold rain to fall on his body. When the ice-cold rain hit his skin, he felt a chill run through his body. The bloodstains were washed away by the rain, and Nangong Wuk's handsome face was once again revealed. His clothes were somewhat tattered, and a lot of his skin was exposed. The scars on his skin had yet to heal, and they looked sinister and terrifying. These scars. Nangong Wuk didn't expect that they were actually caused by the Nangong family. This rain washed away the bloodstains, and it also washed away the last bit of attachment Nangong Wuk had for the Nangong family. A murderous aura gradually condensed, and it gathered in his eyes. It shot toward Nangong Ching, who was in the sky. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Such a gaze that makes one's hair stand on end. Nangong Wuk. Elder Xianying already knows your position, and he is on his way here. Aren't you going to obediently let yourself be captured? Nangong Ching said with a smile. Bufang and Xiao Bai walked to the entrance, and they raised their brows slightly as they looked at the surroundings, which were suffused with a bloody aura that soared into the sky. When Nangong Wuk went crazy, he was really quite terrifying. Nangong Xianying. There will be a day when I will slaughter these 3 old fellows. However, before that, I will first slaughter you. Nangong Wuk looked at Nangong Ching, who was in the sky, and grinned. Chapter 442. The pitter-patter of rain fell from the sky and landed on the ground, shattering the ice-cold raindrops. Nangong Xianying clasped his hands behind his back and wore an ice-cold expression as he slowly walked on the main street of the heavenly mist city. The rain was beating on his body, but it was unable to approach him. Every time he took a step, his figure would explosively shoot a great distance away. Suddenly, he stopped and took out a jade talisman. As he read the information contained within it, the corners of his mouth curled up. I finally found you. Nangong Wuk, let's see where you can run to. Due to his carelessness, Nangong Wuk had managed to escape. This caused him to fly into a rage out of humiliation. He had thought that everything was under his control. However, this brat was still able to find a flaw in his plan and escape. This made him lose face in front of his big brother. Thus, he wished that he could immediately find Nangong Wuk and bring him back to the dungeon. This time, he definitely wouldn't have any chance to escape. The tip of his foot lightly tapped the ground. All of a sudden, the raindrops in the surroundings were blown away by a gale, and Nangong Xianying's body flew out like a real eagle, shooting toward the location of the Cloud Mist restaurant. Nangong Cheng was an extremely talented member of the Nangong family's younger generation. Not only was his cultivation extremely high, but his talent in alchemy was also second only to Nangong Wuk. He had always been jealous of Nangong Wuk because he was the Heavenly Mist City's proud son of heaven. When people mentioned the Nangong family, they would only mention Nangong Wuk and not Nangong Ching. It was because Nangong Wuk had always been suppressing him that he was unable to display his abilities. Now, his time had come. Nangong Wuk had fallen, and he, Nangong Ching, would quickly become famous in the Heavenly Mist City. Moreover, if he could kill Nangong Wuk with his own hands, he would be able to push his name to the top of the waves and become famous overnight. Thus, Nangong Cheng was tempted. Nangong Wuk's killing intent was extremely cold, but Nangong Ching only sneered at him. The current Nangong Wuk wasn't a match for him. Nangong Wuk didn't have a heaven and earth obsidian flame, or even an alchemy fire, so how could he be a match for him? Hualalav, an ice-cold chain coiled behind him like a huge dragon, emitting a tremendous might. This was the might of heaven and earth, an ability mastered by a divine physique echelon expert that could crush a supreme being. Rumble! A bolt of lightning suddenly shot out from the sky. The light flickered, almost tearing the entire sky apart. Nangong Cheng's usually gentle face became twisted and hideous after the appearance of the lightning. Nangong Wuk, go to hell! A long roar rose to the sky. Tens of thousands of raindrops suddenly engulfed the area. They seemed to have turned into sharp steel needles as they shot toward Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk straightened his body, and his pressure slowly spread out. The needle-like raindrops stopped and floated in the air. Zhang Xian waved his hand casually. Instantly, thousands of raindrops exploded, like countless blooming epiphyllum. They were only beautiful for a moment before they withered. Whoosh! Nangong Wuk's figure instantly became blurry, and a sonic boom resounded. Divine physique echelon experts who had broken through one shackle could reach the speed of sound, and they could easily create sonic booms. Their punches were even faster, and their fighting prowess became stronger because their physiques had become stronger. Nangong Wuk stepped in the air and suddenly appeared in front of Nangong Cheng. You want to step on me to rise? I, Nangong Wuk, am not someone who can be stepped on so easily. Nangong Wuk smiled coldly. He punched out. His speed was shockingly fast. Bang! Nangong Cheng stretched out his hand to block the attack. You are so weak now. Nangong Cheng smiled faintly. Spiritual energy burst out of his body, and a scarlet flame soared into the sky. This was alchemic fire. Although it was much weaker than a heaven and earth obsidian flame, its might was still extraordinary. With the addition of the alchemic fire, Nangong Cheng's fighting prowess suddenly erupted. Nangong Wuk was directly smashed into the ground, and a loud bang resounded. The scarlet alchemic fire spread out, evaporating the raindrops falling from the sky. Its might was incomparably strong. Sizzle, steam rose up, and a layer of mist covered the surroundings. The scarlet flame soared into the sky, and it turned into a palm that covered the sky. The palm fiercely slapped down, and the air around it emitted a crackling sound. Bang! The might of this palm was extremely terrifying, and it seemed as if it wanted to slap Nangong Wuk to death. Bufang, who was watching from afar, squinted his eyes as he looked at Nangong Wuk, who was fleeing in all directions. Although he had eaten the prawn meat and recovered a lot of his spirit energy and strength, it was still impossible for him to recover to his peak state. After all, his heaven and earth obsidian flame had been extracted, and he had sustained serious injuries. It was already not bad for him to recover to his current state. Of course, if he could eat a portion of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, the effects would be even better. Bang! Bang! Nangong Cheng, who was floating in the air, laughed excitedly. His hair fluttered in the wind. He waved his palm unceasingly, and he controlled the flaming palm formed by the alchemic fire. He slapped the ground unceasingly, and the ground was continuously shattered. As he looked at Nangong Wuk's fleeing figure, he felt his whole body's blood flow rapidly. He was extremely excited. Die! Die for me! Nangong Cheng looked at Nangong Wuk, who used to be aloof, fleeing in a sorry state from his attacks. Nangong Cheng felt so refreshed that he couldn't even describe it with words. The myriad of flames seemed to have turned into a flaming dragon, and it forced Nangong Wuk into a corner. It was about to burn Nangong Wuk to death. Nangong Cheng's eyes widened in excitement, and his expression became somewhat malevolent as he laughed unceasingly. Your laughter is really King disgusting. Nangong Wuk, who was forced into a corner, stood up and let out a breath. A jade bottle suddenly appeared in his hand. He crushed the jade bottle, and an elixir, which emitted a faint green radiance, flew out of it. There was a faintly discernible pattern flickering on the surface of the elixir. It was Nangong Wuk's secret one-mark spirit elixir. Crack! Nangong Wuk bit the elixir into pieces and swallowed it. Nangong Wuk's surroundings immediately emitted a green radiance, and his aura started to rise. His skin also became sparkling and translucent, as if it was made of fine jade. Nangong Wuk's gaze became profound, and he raised his hand. The red flaming dragon immediately stopped in the air. Nangong Cheng's complexion stiffened, and his smile froze on his face. What was going on? Why did Nangong Wuk suddenly erupt with such a powerful aura? In the next moment, Nangong Cheng discovered that his flaming dragon was torn apart by a tyrannical power. The handsome and confident Nangong Wuk, whose whole body seemed to be emitting a dazzling radiance, suddenly appeared in front of him. His alchemy flame was extinguished. Nangong Wuk raised his white palm and ruthlessly slapped it on Nangong Cheng's face. An explosive sound echoed. Nangong Cheng was directly smashed down from the air. Nangong Wuk, who had swallowed the elixir, became much more indifferent. His speed became faster, and his fighting prowess became stronger. His aura also became more powerful. Nangong Cheng had an illusion that he was facing Nangong Wuk in his peak state. At that time, Nangong Wuk wasn't someone Nangong Cheng could compare with. Nangong Cheng's heart was filled with fear. Nangong Cheng couldn't display his full strength, and he became Nangong Wuk's punching bag. Countless fists pounded on his body, and he was beaten to the point that he didn't want to live anymore. He continuously coughed out blood. His originally gentle figure became even more wretched. Bang! His last fist pounded on Nangong Cheng's dantian. The shockwave suddenly spread out in a huge circle. Nangong Cheng's eyes became listless, and he weakly fell on the ground. His aura was dispirited, and his mouth was foaming with blood. The elixir's effects disappeared. Nangong Wuk felt as if his whole body was being pricked by needles, and his originally sparkling skin was now covered with fine beads of blood. His whole body was covered with blood once again. However, the rain that fell from the sky washed away the blood on his body. It only made him look somewhat miserable. Nangong Wuk grabbed Nangong Cheng's collar and lifted him up. Nangong Wuk looked at Nangong Cheng, who was foaming with blood, and laughed crazily. "You're still acting tough? Why don't you continue acting tough?" Nangong Wuk slapped Nangong Cheng's head again, and the latter didn't even have the strength to resist. "Didn't you want to step on me to climb up the ladder? Come on. Poochie." Nangong Cheng was extremely furious, and he spouted a mouthful of blood. Nangong Wuk punched him in the face, and the latter weakly fell on the ground. Nangong Wuk covered his palm with true energy and pressed it against Nangong Cheng's dantian. A scarlet flame immediately rushed out of his dantian and entered Nangong Wuk's body. Although Nangong Wuk's heaven and earth obsidian flame was extracted, his body still had the aura of the 9 Hell King flame. Suppressing the alchemic flame was too easy, and it wasn't difficult for him to swallow it. "Ah! You can't do this! You can't!" Nangong Cheng crazily struggled. However, he could only look on helplessly as his alchemic flame was extracted. His heart felt empty, and he felt as if his body had been emptied. "Nangong Wuk, you dare?" A roar came from afar, and its speed was extremely fast. Even the raindrops were shattered by this roar. Nangong Xianying finally arrived. 2 pitch-black shackles fluttered in the sky, and they emitted a dreadful and stifling aura. Nangong Wuk sneered coldly as he looked at Nangong Xianying, who had just arrived. He grabbed Nangong Cheng from the ground. Nangong Cheng was like a dead dog, and he didn't want to live anymore. "Stop!" Nangong Xianying's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Nangong Cheng was his junior. How could he let him die like this? "Stop? Do you think I will stop just because you told me to? Who do you think you are, Nangong Xianying?" Nangong Wuk coughed out a mouthful of blood, and his complexion became paler. The elixir's side effects made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He exerted his strength in his palm and directly crushed Nangong Cheng's head. Bufong calmly watched from afar. Nangong Xianying was extremely infuriated. His angry roar, which was accompanied by a dreadful pressure, swept over. He wanted to smash Nangong Wuk into meat paste with a single strike. This move contained Nangong Xianying's boundless fury. Nangong Wuk's whole body became limp and powerless, and he knelt down on one knee. Raindrops slid down his cheeks, and they were ice cold. Buzz, a purple radiance flickered. Xiao Bai's body suddenly appeared in front of Nangong Wuk. The metal wings on his back spread open, and a sonorous sound echoed. Rumble! The veined patterns on his armor flickered, and Xiao Bai raised his fan-like fist and smashed it against Nangong Xianying's fist. Nangong Xianying roared. Green smoke curled up from Bu Fang's hand, and the black turtle constellation Wok floated in his hand. The melted water of the extreme ice domain and the noodles scattered everywhere were all poured into the wok. Bu Fang opened his mouth and spouted a scorching golden flame. The heaven and earth obsidian flames might immediately erupted. Nangong Wuk sensed something, and he turned his head around and looked at Bu Fang in disbelief. A heaven and earth obsidian flame? Owner Bu also had a heaven and earth obsidian flame. Chapter 443. The golden flames were so dazzling and enchanting. The light emitted by the flame was like a small sun, attracting Nangong Wuk's attention. He couldn't believe it. This is the heaven and earth obsidian flame? Is it really a heaven and earth obsidian flame? The might of the golden heaven and earth obsidian flame was not any weaker than his 9 Hell King flame. The fluctuation of the heaven and earth obsidian flame shocked him. He had never imagined that Bu Fang would actually have a heaven and earth obsidian flame. Owner Bu, who was not even in the divine physique echelon, actually had a heaven and earth obsidian flame that even divine physique echelon experts would find difficult to control. This was simply like a fantasy story. If he wasn't at the divine body realm, how could he possibly have the ability to absorb the heaven and earth obsidian fire? Moreover, Owner Bu was not an alchemist. That made it even more difficult. Were the heaven and earth obsidian flames so worthless now? Even an 8th grade war god could obtain it. Wait, what is old Bu trying to do? After Nangong Wuk recovered from his shock, he suddenly saw Bu Fang's actions. When he saw the flame enter the bottom of the black wok, his face couldn't help but become excited. Could it be that old Bu is planning to cook with a heaven and earth obsidian flame? Nangong Wuk was struck by lightning, and his weak face flushed red. What a waste! How could they be so wasteful? How could a heaven and earth obsidian flame be used for cooking? This kind of flame should be used for alchemy. Yes, that's right, it should be used to refine pills. Using a heaven and earth obsidian flame to cook was like using a dragon saber to cut a carrot. How extravagant was that? This old Bu, simply committing a sin. He had known Bu Fang for a long time, but he hadn't realized that Bu Fang had a heaven and earth obsidian flame. He drew a deep breath. Nangong Xianying also sensed the heaven and earth obsidian flame's aura, and he couldn't help but turn his head to look at it in astonishment. Heaven and earth obsidian flame? How could an 8th grade ant have a heaven and earth obsidian flame? Nangong Xianying's reaction wasn't much different from Nangong Wuk's. They were both so shocked that they almost started doubting their own lives. One must know that his big brother, Nangong Xuanhe, didn't hesitate to betray the Nangong family in order to obtain the 9 Hell King flame in Nangong Wuk's body. He forcefully extracted the heaven and earth obsidian flame from Nangong Wuk's body and killed a genius alchemist. Without the heaven and earth obsidian flame, Nangong Wuk's talent in alchemy would be greatly reduced. The pride of Heavenly Mist City would soon become a thing of the past. And all of this was because of that heaven and earth obsidian flame. But what did he see now? An unfamiliar 8th grade war god, an ant-like fellow, actually took out something like the heaven and earth obsidian flame. This feeling was simply unacceptable to him. What he found most difficult to accept was, this fellow actually used the heaven and earth obsidian flame to cook. Cooking? Are you King showing off? Boom! The enraged Nangong Xianying punched Xiao Bai and sent him flying. The metal wings on Whitey's back trembled violently, and clanging sounds could be heard as they collided with each other. Swoosh! Swoosh! Numerous flying knives shot out of Xiao Bai's body. Their speed was extremely fast, and they seemed as if they wanted to tear through the air and soar into the sky. Many whistling sounds resounded as the flying knives flew toward Nangong, shining like they were on fire. Their speed was really too fast. Moreover, there were so many of them that they blotted out the sky and the sun. After leveling up, the speed of Xiao Bai's flying knives had become even faster. Nangong Xianying was, after all, an expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. His true energy burst forth, and 2 chains danced in the air behind him. They emitted clanging sounds as they emitted a radiance. Heaven and earth's pressure swept through the surroundings, causing the crushed stones on the ground to shatter. Nangong Xianying retracted his gaze from Bufang and raised his palm, which was emitting a powerful energy. His true energy revolved and bounced off all of the flying knives. The flying knives that were bounced off stopped in midair and flew back to Xiao Bai's back. This cycle continued without end. This puppet is somewhat interesting? Nangong Xianying's pupils contracted. Xiao Bai's fighting prowess exceeded his expectations. It was a divine echelon realm puppet. However, how could a divine echelon realm puppet appear here? Wasn't this kind of puppet something that could only be controlled by the puppet sect? The puppet sect's experts were currently in Heavenly Mist City. Could it be that this kid in front of him was related to the puppet sect? Nangong Xianying narrowed his eyes, and he suddenly felt a little apprehensive. If Bufang was really a member of the puppet sect, he would have to reconsider whether he should kill him or not. After all, the puppet sect was really terrifying. However, before that, he still had to kill Nangong Wuk to prevent any future troubles. Although his alchemy talent had been destroyed, his cultivation talent was still monstrous. If he wasn't so lazy, he would have broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles long ago. However, his laziness gave Nangong Xianying an opportunity to deal with him. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. After the ramen went through the boiling hot soup, a faint fragrance spread out. It wasn't very strong, but it clearly reached everyone's nostrils. Bufang scooped out a big ladle of abyssal chili sauce and poured it into the hot soup. In an instant, the boiling hot soup turned red. A spicy aroma spread out and surged out violently. Bufang's movements were extremely skillful. He casually patted the black turtle constellation walk, and the ramen soared into the sky and fell into the porcelain bowl he had prepared. Bufang poured the boiling red soup into the bowl, and the spicy aroma spread out. A bowl of rampage ramen was completed. At this moment, Nangong Wuk was grieving. He didn't expect that Bufang would really use a heaven and earth obsidian flame to cook. His heart was in pain. When he thought about the heaven and earth obsidian flame that was forcefully taken from him, his heart ached even more. It was really infuriating. Why did he take out a heaven and earth obsidian flame when his heart was in pain? Bufang did it on purpose. Take the noodles. After Bufang finished cooking the rampage ramen, he glanced at Nangong Wuk, who was grieving, and curled up the corners of his mouth. He casually waved his hand, and the rampage ramen flew toward Nangong Wuk. What was this thing? A bowl of noodles? What was the use of giving him noodles at this moment? Nangong Wuk was taken aback, and he subconsciously caught the bowl of rampage ramen that Bufang threw at him. Wait, this is a ramen cooked with a heaven and earth obsidian flame. Did Bufang want to comfort my wounded heart and let me experience the taste of a heaven and earth obsidian flame once again? Nangong Wuk's hands trembled as he held the bowl of rampage ramen. His eyes were brimming with tears. Bufang was really too meticulous, and he was so touched that he wanted to cry. Nangong Xianying looked at the steaming bowl of ramen and sneered in disdain. Eating ramen? Did he think that this bowl of ramen was some kind of elixir? It was simply ridiculous, and he didn't know what he was talking about. Bang! Nangong Wuk snorted angrily as he punched the last flying knife. Swoosh! The flying knife flew toward Xiao Bai's wings, and a purple luster appeared in Xiao Bai's eyes. Buzz, a peculiar fluctuation spread out. Then, the armor on Xiao Bai's body blossomed with a dazzling radiance. The array on the armor was activated. A white circular array floated in front of Xiao Bai's belly. Bang! A loud explosion resounded. An energy cannon shot out from the array in front of Xiao Bai's belly. It was extremely fast, and it gave rise to a rumbling sound. Nangong Xianying was taken aback once again. He took a deep breath. This puppet was really incredible. A cannon array? They actually engraved a cannon array on a puppet? Who was the one who designed this puppet? A true energy barrier appeared, and the cannon array smashed against it. Nangong Xianying was unexpectedly forced to retreat several steps. He was, after all, a divine physique echelon expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. His cultivation was extremely powerful, and he was able to forcefully resist it. Smoke and dust filled the air as Nangong Xianying dispersed his barrier and exhaled a mouthful of white air. However, his pupils suddenly shrank again. Nangong Xianying felt a terrifying fluctuation coming from the white mist in front of him. Bang! 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 Continuous explosions resounded as the cannon array tore through the white mist and shot toward Nangong Xianying. Nangong Xianying's whole body's hair stood on end. Even though he was a divine physique echelon expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles, he didn't dare to use his fleshly body to resist the cannon array. Thus, he once again created a true energy barrier. The energy cannons bombarded the true energy barrier unceasingly, forcing Nangong Xianying's body to retreat. Nangong Wuk was stupefied. His mouth was right in front of the blue and white porcelain bowl, but he didn't know how to eat it. He looked at Xiao Bai, who was like a human-shaped destroyer, in a daze. Cannon array, the cannon array, which was used to attack cities, was being casually bombarded by Nangong Wuk. It turned out that Lord Bai was actually so ferocious. Nangong Wuk swallowed a mouthful of saliva and accidentally coughed out a mouthful of blood. After gasping for breath, Nangong Wuk poured the ramen into his mouth. Old Bu didn't even give him a pair of chopsticks when he asked him to eat ramen. Nangong Wuk gulped down a mouthful of steaming soup and stuffed his mouth full of ramen. He chewed the ramen unceasingly. Suddenly, his eyes widened and his eyes became bloodshot. His pale face instantly turned red, and it seemed as if it was about to burst into flames. What the F***ck is this? Why was it so spicy? Nangong Wuk's face was streaked with tears as he chewed while crying. Bu Fang dispersed the 10,000 bestial flames and put away the black turtle constellation Wa. He expressionlessly looked at Nangong Wuk. I saw that you were heavily injured, so I added some ingredients to make it more effective, Bu Fang said. Bang! 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 In the next moment, a surge of true energy surged out of Nangong Wuk's body, and he felt as if he was about to be set ablaze. Ah! It's spicy! Nangong Wuk jumped up from the ground and tore apart the clothes on his body, which were already tattered, as he roared. His true energy surged up violently. Nangong Wuk, who felt as if he was about to be set ablaze, gulped down the remaining ramen with tears streaming down his face. He roared loudly. His bloodshot eyes glared at Nangong Xianying, who was in the distance. Damn it! Lord Bai, get out of the way! Let me deal with this old dog. Chapter 444. Lord Bai, get out of the way! Let me deal with this old dog. Nangong Wuk straightened his neck and roared with bloodshot eyes. His aura was like that of a dragon as it roared in the heavens. Nangong Xianying was almost angered to death. Who the hell did you call an old dog? He, Nangong Xianying, had a noble status, yet this brat dared to call him that. It was simply unforgivable. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered, and the array in front of his belly emitted green smoke. It stopped revolving and no longer shot out cannons. Nangong Xianying was drenched in cold sweat. He didn't expect that he, a dignified divine physique echelon expert with 2 severed shackles, would be forced into such a sorry state by a mere puppet. Nangong Xianying's aura became even more oppressive as he coldly looked at Xiao Bai. Nangong Wuk howled as he descended from the sky and landed in front of Nangong Xianying. Sizzle! 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 When the ice-cold rainwater fell on Nangong Wuk's skin, it immediately evaporated, and steam rose from his body. Nangong Wuk felt as if his skin was on fire, and this scorching sensation made him feel extremely uncomfortable. However, the true energy in his dantian was surging, and the alchemic flame he had just absorbed was also surging and roaring unceasingly in his dantian. His strength unexpectedly underwent a great change at this moment. How did his strength undergo such a great change? What was the reason behind it? Nangong Wuk's body was burning with heat, and the spiciness in his mouth caused him to howl. However, his mind was still filled with shock. Could it be because of that bowl of ramen? He recalled the bowl of ramen that Bufang had thrown at him. That bowl of ramen was so spicy that he had no friends, and it gave him a headache. Seeing that you were heavily injured, I decided to add some spice. Is this adding spice? This is a poison. Nangong Wuk roared, and his naked upper body became scarlet as his true energy started to boil. The blood was washed away by the rain, and waves of heat surged out. Although Nangong Wuk was in a sorry state, he clenched his fists and felt that he was filled with power. Nangong Xianying was startled. How did this brat become so terrifying? Chi. Nangong Wuk spouted hot air from his nostrils as he stared at Nangong Xianying like a bull in heat. Old dog, die. After letting out a roar, Nangong Wuk shot out explosively. His speed was so fast that it was almost impossible for anyone to catch a glimpse of his body. The rain was swept up by his figure as he rushed over. Boom! This punch almost pierced through the air. Nangong Xianying's pupils contracted. He raised his palm and collided with Nangong Wuk's fist. There was a loud bang. Both of them took several steps back. Nangong Xianying's heart shuddered. How was this possible? How did he become so strong all of a sudden? Ao! Nangong Wuk was pushed back. After he stabilized his body, he roared and charged forward once again. Nangong Xianying restrained the shock in his heart and released his true energy, causing the 2 chains on his back to emit rattling sounds. Boom! A terrifying energy wave surged out and smashed against Nangong Wuk's body. Nangong Wuk's true energy shook intensely as he unexpectedly withstood the energy wave. After spurting out a mouthful of blood, Nangong Wuk charged in front of Nangong Xianying. He straightened his neck and glared at Nangong Xianying with a malevolent expression, causing Nangong Xianying's heart to tremble. You little bastard, you old dog! Blood dripped from the corners of Nangong Wuk's mouth as he glared at Nangong Xianying. His mouth was swollen due to the spiciness. However, this wasn't a problem. Nangong Wuk felt extremely carefree after his power had increased sharply. He grabbed Nangong Xianying's shoulder with his palm and smashed his fist toward Nangong Xianying's head. Bang! Nangong Xianying's complexion changed as he raised his hand to block it. Nangong Xianying's arm and Nangong Wuk's fist collided. Nangong Xianying snorted and became even angrier. He wanted to shake Nangong Wuk off, but he discovered that the lad was grabbing his shoulder and he couldn't struggle free. Nangong Xianying snorted again as he fiercely smashed his elbow down. Nangong Wuk was extremely excited. Who asked you to act pretentious in front of me? I will beat you until even your father can't recognize you. Bang! 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 Elbow strikes and angry roars were unceasing. Ah! You little bastard, you dare to bite me? I am biting you, old dog! Bufang, who was standing at a distance, was speechless as he looked at the 2 people who were fighting each other. Nangong Wuk was fighting crazily, and he even bit Nangong Xianying's arm, causing the latter to roar angrily. The rampage ramen could increase one's fighting prowess by 2 times. With Nangong Wuk's foundation, the increase in his fighting prowess was more than 2 times. If Nangong Wuk's body wasn't so weak, he would have been able to defeat Nangong Xianying. Unfortunately, Nangong Wuk's injuries were too severe. Even the Rampage Ramen couldn't change the fact that he was heavily injured. Moreover, the effect of the Rampage Ramen wouldn't last for long. Bang! Bang! The ground seemed to be trembling. Both of them were at the divine physique echelon, and their fighting prowess was outstanding. As they battled, they shattered the ground. However, the Heavenly Mist City was protected by a protective array, and the shattered ground would automatically be repaired. However, the elixir stores in the vicinity were in a miserable state. They were continuously destroyed. After a long while, Nangong Wuk crawled up from the ground. Blood was unceasingly flowing out of his body. Nangong Xianying, who was bombarded by the Rampage Ramen, fell on the ground, motionless. Nangong Wuk was gasping for breath, and his chest was like a bellows, which was unceasingly twitching. He was too tired, and after the Rampage Ramen's effect disappeared, a tide-like tiredness surged over him and engulfed him. Nangong Wuk's body felt like it was filled with lead, and he struggled to take a step. Nangong Wuk's eyes were half opened, and he grinned at Bufang with his swollen mouth. You little bastard, you really deserve to die." However, Nangong Wuk's body suddenly stiffened. He slowly turned around and saw Nangong Xianying crawling up from the ground. Nangong Wuk swallowed a black elixir. That elixir had a faintly discernible pattern on it. When the elixir entered his mouth, Nangong Xianying's aura started recovering and rising, and he unexpectedly reached his previous peak state. However, compared to his previous state, he was in a much more sorry state. "Damn it!" Nangong Xianying angrily roared, and he swept his leg, which ferociously pounded on Nangong Wuk's waist. Nangong Wuk, who was already exhausted, couldn't resist it. He was sent flying, and his body crashed into an elixir store, which was completely covered in rubble. Even after a long while, Nangong Wuk still couldn't crawl out of the rubble. Nangong Xianying's hair was disheveled, and his clothes were full of tears. There were also many hideous bite marks on them, which were quite a ghastly sight. Nangong Xianying rubbed his body, and his gaze fell on Bufang. "It's you, isn't it? It's your bowl of noodles that allowed this little bastard's power to suddenly erupt, isn't it?" He spat out each and every word with a malevolent expression. Nangong Xianying's killing intent became even more intense. Bufang calmly stood at the entrance, and he expressionlessly looked at Nangong Xianying. "Yes, your guess is correct, but it's a pity that there's no reward," Bufang said. "Reward? I will give you a reward for your death," Nangong Xianying coldly said. As he spoke, a trace of excitement and greed could be seen in his eyes. A heaven and earth obsidian flame. This kid still had a heaven and earth obsidian flame in his body. Nangong Xianying originally thought that he was a member of the puppet sect, and he wanted to be lenient, but after Bufang had a heaven and earth obsidian flame, being lenient? Only an idiot would do such a thing. If he could obtain a heaven and earth obsidian flame, his status would surely rise, and his alchemy skills would also become more and more powerful, and he might even break through to become a one-cloud alchemist. The benefits of obtaining a heaven and earth obsidian flame were too great. "I will slowly drain your heaven and earth obsidian flame, just like how my big brother drained Nangong Wuk's 9 Hell King flame." Step by step, Nangong Xianying slowly walked toward Bufang. Bufang let out a long breath. He opened his eyes, and in the next moment, Xiao Bai's body appeared in front of Bufang, blocking his path. The purple radiance in Xiao Bai's eyes suddenly changed into an ash-gray color. An ice-cold murderous aura surged within his eyes. The arrays on Xiao Bai's body all shone with a radiance. "Your puppet is really powerful, but it's still not enough to block me," Nangong Xianying sneered as he looked at Xiao Bai. Nangong Xianying's feet suddenly burst forth, and he instantly broke through the speed of sound, appearing in front of Xiao Bai. Bang! Before the array cannon on Xiao Bai's body could be fired, it was smacked away by Nangong Xianying's palm. A stream of true energy fiercely shot out and struck Xiao Bai's body, sending Xiao Bai flying. It was impossible for him to keep up with Nangong Xianying's movements. The difference in speed between the two of them was too great. Bu Fang's pupils shrank. Bang! 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 Xiao Bai struggled to get up and unceasingly charged toward Nangong Xianying. However, the two of them weren't on the same level. Every time, Xiao Bai would be smashed into the ground. Did you see that? Your puppet will soon be smashed into pieces by me. What other tricks do you have? Nangong Xianying sneered coldly. He coldly looked at Bu Fang. Bu Fang narrowed his eyes and Xiaopi, who was on his shoulder, waved its sickle-like claws. It seemed like it wasn't satisfied with Nangong Xianying's arrogant attitude. Xiao Bai, who was lying on the ground, had his ash-gray eyes flicker once again. His eyes were flickering between purple and white, and a terrifying aura was gradually emitted from Xiao Bai's body. However, just when Xiao Bai's aura was about to erupt, squeak! Xiaopi, who was lying on Bu Fang's shoulder, let out a cry and turned into a golden beam of light. Its speed was so fast that it seemed like a golden beam of light was tearing through the void. It was so fast that people couldn't catch it. Nangong Xianying was stupefied, and his heart palpitated. He raised his palm and fiercely swatted at Xiaopi, who was rushing toward him. A puppet? A prawn? Don't tell me that you only have these tricks? Nangong Xianying roared, and his aura rose steadily. The two chains on his back flickered to their peak. Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and they shrunk to the size of sesame seeds. He discovered that the golden beam of light, which was shooting toward him, had unexpectedly disappeared. Chapter 445. Where was that prawn? Nangong Xianying's eyes were filled with a baleful aura, but he discovered that the dazzling golden radiance in front of him was nowhere to be seen. It was as if that golden mantis shrimp had never appeared in the first place. All of a sudden, Nangong Xianying felt a chill run down his spine. He felt an enormous shadow covering him, and that shadow contained a berserk aura. What was going on? Nangong Xianying's heart shuddered, and he raised his head. He saw a figure in the sky, which was so huge that it covered the sun and the sky. Raindrops fell from the sky, and when they fell on that enormous golden figure, the water splashed everywhere. Roar! A deafening roar resounded. That tiny mantis shrimp had suddenly become so huge. Its oppressive aura caused Nangong Xianying's eyes to tremble. Bu Fang was also stupefied as he looked at the enormous mantis shrimp. He didn't expect that Xiaopi, who was usually lying on his shoulder quietly, could actually transform. It seemed like this little guy wasn't as simple as he seemed. The sharp sickle-like claws were extremely huge, and when it waved them, it seemed as if it wanted to cut the ground into pieces. Nangong Xianying felt an ice-cold wind blowing at him, and his body flickered as he shot into the distance. Bang! Xiao Bai was slightly startled, and the fluctuating colors in his eyes disappeared, and they returned to their original gray color. Xiao Bai slapped the ground with his palm, and his body soared into the sky. Xiaopi's body, which was like a giant golden dragon, moved, and the carapace on his body collided with each other, emitting sharp sounds. Xiao Bai's body floated in the sky. Xiaopi's body turned around, and Xiao Bai landed on Xiaopi's back. Xiaopi's compound eyes rolled around, and he waved his sickle-like claws as he let out a roar. Buzz! A hazy golden brilliance spread out from Shrimpy's body. These specks of light enveloped Whitey, causing Whitey's entire body to be covered in a layer of noble gold. Xiao Bai's grayish-white eyes flickered, and the light of the formation on his body blazed brightly. What is this? Acrobatics? After Nangong Xianying steadied himself, a strange expression appeared on his face as he looked at the puppet that was riding a giant golden shrimp. He felt very strange and speechless. Bu Fang's eyes brightened as he looked at Xiao Bai and Xiaopi. He didn't even know that these two could form a team. All along, Bufang had thought that Xiaopi had no other use other than swimming in the wok to improve the taste and texture of the dishes. So he had been wrong all along. Shrimpy can actually transform. It's useless. You are both too weak. Nangong Xianying didn't care about it at all. He let out a long roar, and his true energy surged out of his body. His true energy transformed into an eagle that spread its wings and soared into the sky. That eagle's body was bound by two ice-cold chains. Bang! Surging energy waves burst out of Nangong Xianying's body and spread out in all directions. So this is your final trump card. Very well, then I will completely tear it apart and let you feel what is called despair. When his voice faded, Nangong Xianying's body shot out. His speed surpassed the speed of sound, and a series of sonic booms echoed out. In an instant, Nangong Xianying appeared in front of the giant Xiaopi. Xiaopi, who was carrying Xiao Bai on its back, glared at him. Its numerous legs moved in the air, and its body shot out at an inconceivable speed. Its speed wasn't any slower than Nangong Xianying's. Nangong Xianying's pupils shrank, and he punched out. His fist's wind was ferocious, and it seemed like it turned into a roaring phantom as it pounded toward Xiaopi. That terrifying fluctuation seemed like it wanted to smash Xiaopi into pieces with a single punch. A wave of intense fluctuation burst out. A blazing radiance shot out from Xiaopi's back. Rip! It seemed like the air was torn apart. It was an energy cannon shot out by a magic array cannon. Xiao Bai, who was standing on Xiaopi's back, was engulfed by a layer of hazy golden radiance. The magic array on his body also shone with a golden radiance. The array cannon shot out was also engulfed by a layer of golden radiance. The fist's energy was directly torn apart by the array cannon. The energy of the energy cannon didn't dissipate. It emitted a deafening rumble as it flew toward Nangong Xianying. So fast. Why is this array cannon's speed so much faster than before? All the hair on Nangong Xianying's body stood on end. If Xiao Bai's array cannon could be said to be troublesome to deal with, then the might of the array cannon at this moment terrified him. He couldn't dodge it. Nangong Xianying raised his true energy barrier, and he had no choice but to face it head-on. Rumble! Everyone in the heavenly mist city, which was shrouded in darkness, couldn't help but turn their heads to look in a certain direction where an intense explosion had occurred. A golden radiance soared up to the sky. Then, a terrifying wave of energy surged out. Bufang was somewhat shocked, and he couldn't help but inwardly suck in a breath of cold air as he looked at the hazy white radiance in front of him. When the smoke and dust dispersed, a surging mist pervaded the surroundings. Then, the surrounding ground was exposed. The whole ground caved in, and crushed rocks flew everywhere, while the ground cracked unceasingly. Such destructive power was really frightening. How did the array cannon's might suddenly increase by so much? Bufang's heart suddenly jolted, and his eyes slightly widened. Could it be that Xiaopi could not only enhance the taste of the dishes, but also increase its combat power? That golden light enveloping him. Perhaps it could really increase his battle prowess? Thinking of this, Bufang looked at Xiaopi with some surprise. Where did this little guy come from? What kind of freak was inside that crystal source? The mist dispersed. It revealed a figure that was standing tall. At this moment, Nangong Xianying was in an extremely sorry state. He never expected that the might of the array cannon would be so much stronger than the previous ones. The clothes on his body were all torn to shreds. His skin and flesh were even slightly charred. It was simply terrifying. The moment the energy barrier came into contact with the array cannon, it immediately shattered. It simply couldn't resist for long. It was simply terrifying. Nangong Xianying raised his head, and a trickle of blood slowly flowed down from his nose. Whitey stood on Shrimpy's back, its entire body shimmering with a golden radiance. The pair of metal wings on its back suddenly spread open. A clanging sound was heard. Another array cannon condensed in the golden array formation in front of his belly. Rip! Another energy cannon shot toward him at an extremely fast speed. Its speed frightened Nangong Xianying. Dodge? No. It was too late. Nangong Xianying once again condensed his true energy barrier and wanted to resist the cannon's attack. A loud explosion resounded. A dazzling radiance and intense fluctuations resounded. Nangong Xianying's body was sent flying by the explosion. Bang! 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 At this moment, Xiao Bai had completely turned into a human-shaped cannon. The array in front of his belly shot out many array cannons. Each cannon seemed as if it wanted to tear the air apart. A deafening explosion resounded. Nangong Xianying didn't want to live anymore. Shameless, he couldn't resist the array cannon. Each energy cannon was equivalent to the attack of a divine physique echelon expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. How could he block it? He wanted to block it and even tried to block it, but he couldn't. After more than 10 array cannons shot out, the array in front of Xiao Bai's belly emitted thick smoke. It seemed as if the array couldn't withstand it anymore and dispersed. The golden energy released by Xiaopi's body dimmed and disappeared. Xiaopi's body, which was like a giant golden dragon, shrunk and became as small as before. It lay on Xiao Bai's round head. It seemed as if a layer of the ground had been shaved off. The elixir stores in the surroundings were all smashed. Poochie! Nangong Xianying slowly crawled up from the ground and spouted a mouthful of blood. His aura was extremely weak. He still hadn't died. As expected of an expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles, Nangong Xianying raised his head. His whole body was bathed in blood and he was coughing up blood. His aura was extremely weak and miserable. Ha 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 ha! You don't have any more moves, do you? Why don't you continue to attack? Continue attacking. Nangong Xianying staggered and stabilized his body. He widened his eyes and laughed heartily. Bufang, who was leaning against the door, calmly looked at Nangong Xianying. In the sky, the golden radiance enveloping Xiao Bai's body had dimmed. However, it was still covered by a layer of membrane. It was obvious that after Xiaopi's body shrunk, its amplification ability had decreased. However, it was enough. The pair of metal wings on Xiao Bai's back shook. His body gave off a sonic boom as he appeared in front of Nangong Xianying. Nangong Xianying's pupils shrank and he raised his hand to block it. The 2 of them immediately started fighting with their fists. Bang! 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 As the attacks erupted, Nangong Xianying was forced to retreat step by step. He was injured. His injuries were severe and he couldn't block it anymore. However, he still had to block it even if he couldn't. He didn't want to die. He angrily roared and punched out, colliding with Xiao Bai's fist. Shockwaves surged out. Xiao Bai's eyes flickered. He deflected the punch and quickly grabbed Nangong Xianying's neck. He ruthlessly pressed Nangong Xianying against the ground. Crushed stones flew everywhere as he punched Nangong Xianying, causing the ground to tremble. Bang! With a loud bang, the entire ground was smashed and sunk in. The Heavenly Mist City's array couldn't be repaired in time. Nangong Xianying was lying on the ground like a dead dog, unable to move. Xiao Bai stood up and folded his wings. His imposing manner was like a rainbow. You can't kill me. You can't kill me. Cough cough. However, Nangong Xianying quickly crawled up from the ground once again. He coughed out blood and swallowed another green elixir. His aura unexpectedly recovered once again. He laughed crazily and looked at Xiao Bai, Xiaopi, and Bufang. Ha ha ha! With the 2-mark spirit elixir, you won't be able to kill me. However, he still felt a slight pain in his heart. Shockwaves surged out as Nangong Xianying's aura soared. It became more and more terrifying. Xiao Bai's eyes flickered and the aura on his body gradually condensed. Xiaopi, who was lying on Xiao Bai's head, stood up and looked at Nangong Xianying. In the next moment, a squeaking sound echoed. A golden light flashed and instantly penetrated Nangong Xianying's body. Nangong Xianying's laughter came to an abrupt stop. In the air, Xiaopi waved his sickle-like claws and moved his numerous legs. Then, they turned into numerous golden lights and rapidly pierced through Nangong Xianying's body. They pierced through him like a sieve. Chapter 446. When the golden radiance dissipated, a bloody mist appeared. The bloody mist was so dense that it didn't dissipate. Xiaopi's body swayed as he crawled in the air. Finally, he returned to Xiao Bai's head and lay down on it. Nangong Xianying's eyes widened and were filled with shock and disbelief. He stiffly lowered his head and looked at the numerous bloody holes on his body. He was so depressed that he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly became dispirited, and he lost all of his vitality. Why did this happen? He actually died in the hands of a shrimp. His body was pierced through before the elixir's effects could take effect. His blood flowed chaotically, and even his heart was pierced through. It was impossible for him to survive. He wouldn't be able to survive. Puff. After continuously coughing out blood, Nangong Xianying's body started trembling intensely, as if he was shaking a leaf. Fresh blood flowed out from the bloody holes on his body. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and finally fell to the ground. His aura quickly disappeared. The rain, which had been raining for an entire night, finally stopped. The dark clouds seemed to have been dispersed by a formless wind, and the raindrops disappeared. Xiao Bai raised his hand and scratched his round head. However, he bumped into Xiaopi. He grabbed the little guy and placed him on his shoulder. Xiao Bai's eyes turned purple as he turned around and walked toward the store. Xiaopi crawled on top of Xiao Bai's head and found a comfortable place to sleep. It seemed like the matter had come to an end. The people sent by the Nangong family to capture Nangong Wuk were almost completely annihilated. No one had expected such a thing to happen. Since Nangong Wuk was already heavily injured, the Nangong family's people didn't think that anything unexpected would happen. Moreover, Nangong Xianying, a divine physique echelon expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles, would definitely succeed. However, something unexpected happened that surprised everyone. A restaurant, which the Nangong family didn't even put in their eyes, unexpectedly annihilated all of their people. One could imagine how big of an uproar it would cause if this matter were to spread back to the Nangong clan. Bufang shot a glance at Nangong Xianying's corpse. The latter's life aura had already completely disappeared, and it was obvious that he wouldn't be able to survive. Bufang walked out of the store and slowly walked toward the ruins in the distance. He kicked away a piece of rubble, revealing a figure beneath it. Nangong Wuk's upper body was bare, and his body was covered with scars. His aura was extremely weak. His lips were swollen as he lay in the ruins, sleeping soundly. He was so tired that he didn't even want to move a finger. Bufang looked at the snoring Nangong Wuk, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He thought that this guy was kicked to death by Nangong Xianying. In the end, this guy was only sleeping, and he was sleeping so soundly. His life was really tough. After picking Nangong Wuk up from the ground, Bufang dragged him toward the store. Pring! There was a soft sound. The bronze gate was tightly shut. The outside of the store became extremely quiet. The black clouds in the sky had already dispersed, and the rain had also gradually stopped. A gentle breeze was blowing, bringing with it the chill of the night. Nangong Xianying's corpse was lying on the ground, and it was completely devoid of life. It seemed extremely miserable. The surrounding ground, which had been destroyed by the Heavenly Mist City's array, started to slowly recover, and the ground was gradually mended. However, Nangong Xianying's corpse was lying there alone, and no one came out to collect it. Creak! The sound of feet stepping on crushed stones resounded, and a figure slowly appeared in the darkness. This figure was wrapped in a black robe, and his facial features couldn't be clearly seen. However, it was clear that this figure was carrying a huge bronze chest on his back. A scarlet radiance flickered under this black robe, and it was extremely horrifying. That puppet is somewhat mystical? It isn't my puppet sex puppet, but it is still so powerful. I'm quite curious. A hoarse voice resounded, and it lingered in the surroundings. That figure chuckled faintly. His laughter was like sand, and it resounded in the surroundings, causing people's hair to stand on end. However, it isn't too bad. It unexpectedly left behind a divine physique echelon's corpse. The Nangong family's second elder, he. If the Nangong family's people saw this puppet in the secret realm, what would they do? That figure stood next to Nangong Xianying's corpse. He suddenly moved his shoulder, and the bronze chest fell on the ground with a bang, which caused the ground to tremble intensely. Creak! It was as if the bronze lid of the chest had been opened, and a distant sound resounded. An eerie aura spread out from the bronze chest. A pair of hands suddenly stretched out, grabbed Nangong Xianying's feet, and pulled him into the bronze chest. After Nangong Xianying's corpse was pulled into the chest, a distorted roar echoed out. It seemed as if a distorted face wanted to rush out of the chest. However, that puppet sex expert laughed in a hoarse voice, and he extended his finger and lightly flicked Nangong Xianying's head. A loud bang resounded. Nangong Xianying's corpse was pulled into the chest, and the lid was closed with a loud bang. Creak, creak, the crisp sound of bones being bitten resounded from the chest. The figure turned his body around, and his scarlet eyes took a deep look at the tightly shut store. Then, he carried the bronze chest on his back, and slowly walked toward a distant place. His figure gradually disappeared into the darkness of the night. A gust of wind blew over, and it swept up the crushed stones on the ground, causing them to rustle. Heavenly Mist City, Pill Tower. Yang Meiji's tall and sturdy body was carefully kneeling on a yellow praying mat, and she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. In front of her was an old man who had a white beard, hair, and eyebrows. That old man's eyes were closed, and his breath was calm and steady. Every time he breathed, his beard would flutter lightly. Teacher, how long do I have to stay in the Pill Tower? Yang Meiji moved her body bashfully, and she asked awkwardly. In the next moment, the old man slowly opened his eyes, and he looked at Yang Meiji. Currently, Heavenly Mist City is undergoing a drastic change, and the secret realm is about to open. This time, the secret realm will be extraordinary, and I will personally bring you in. This time, both of us must grasp this opportunity, so when the secret realm opens we can leave. The secret realm opens? Yang Meiji's complexion changed. Didn't that mean that there was still 1 or 2 days left? Are you bored? Then go and refine more one-mark spirit pills. Alchemy is a matter that requires more practice and more pondering. Your cultivation hasn't reached the divine physique echelon, and you rely on your superior mental energy, so you need more practice and pondering. Yang Meiji immediately drooped her head, and she looked like a frosted eggplant. She softly replied, "Oh." She didn't understand. What could be in the secret realm that her teacher would value so much? Nangong family. Ouyang Xuanhe was excitedly chatting with 2 experts from the ancient Shura city. He didn't expect that the experts from the ancient Shura city would come to the Heavenly Mist City. The ancient Shura city and the Pill Palace were both first-rate factions in the Hidden Dragon continent. However, the ancient Shura city was the most mysterious faction among the first-rate factions. This was because no one knew the exact location of the ancient Shura city. They only knew that the ancient Shura city existed, and it was even more mysterious than the Hidden Dragon Royal Court. Thus, many factions instinctively revered the ancient Shura city. Moreover, the experts who came from the ancient Shura city were all extremely powerful, and they naturally wouldn't offend them. The experts from the ancient Shura city were all clad in blood-red robes, and they had solemn expressions as they chatted with Nangong Xuanhe. All of a sudden, a person rushed into the Nangong family's residence in a fluster, and he looked at Nangong Xuanhe, who was sitting in the main seat, with a frightened expression on his face. Great Elder! Bad news! This was an expert of the divine physique echelon, who had broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles. At this moment, his heart was in a mess. Why are you so flustered? Where is your sense of propriety? Nangong Xuanhe's complexion immediately changed, and he berated him. In front of the experts from the ancient Shura city, he still wanted to save some face, and he couldn't allow them to laugh at him. However, in the next moment, the words spoken by the guard caused Nangong Xuanhe's complexion to drastically change. Great Elder! The people that the second elder brought to capture Nangong Wuk are all dead, and the second elder is also missing. I'm afraid that he met with a mishap. The divine physique echelon expert trembled as he said what he wanted to say. What? A loud bang resounded. The chair that Nangong Xuanhe was sitting on suddenly broke into pieces, and he widened his eyes as he stood up, and his aura surged. What did you say? All the people who were chasing after Nangong Wuk are dead? Chapter 447. Black Eagle is dead? How could he be dead? How could that little bastard Nangong Wuk kill a black eagle? Nangong Xuanhe didn't conceal his aura at all. As he released his aura, a terrifying fluctuation filled the entire hall, giving rise to a whistling gale. The ancient Shura city's expert calmly looked at Nangong Xuanhe with a faint smile on his face. His smile was filled with ridicule. However, Nangong Xuanhe didn't have the mood to care about the ancient Shura city's expert. His heart was in a mess. Black Eagle was dead? That was his little brother. How could he be dead? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. In the end, he almost roared. Tell me, who did it? Nangong Xuanhe roared. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at the expert who broke through one of the Supreme Being's shackles. The guard trembled in fear. After all, he had witnessed how terrifying Nangong Xuanhe was. After all, the entire Nangong family was taken away by Nangong Xuanhe. This was enough to show how terrifying he was. He really didn't want to face the furious Nangong Xuanhe. However, it was a small restaurant. The Black Eagle's second elder disappeared in that restaurant. Other than the second elder's corpse, the others' corpses were all there. The guard said while trembling. A small restaurant? Nangong Xuanhe suppressed the anger in his heart and glared at the guard. Go to a small restaurant? Heavenly Mist City still had a restaurant? Impossible. Even if there was a restaurant, it should be a half-dead one. In Heavenly Mist City, there was the multi-taste fasting pill invented by the Nangong family. Why would a restaurant exist? Moreover, a restaurant dared to protect a criminal that the Nangong family wanted to kill. This was simply unforgivable. Flames of anger surged out from Nangong Xuanhe's body. An oppressive aura filled the air, and the pressure of heaven and earth spread out. Nangong Xuanhe was an expert who broke through two of the Supreme Being's shackles. He was on the verge of breaking through the third shackle. His cultivation was powerful and his aura was terrifying. When he released his aura, many people trembled in fear. However, the experts of the ancient Shura city were still fine because their cultivations weren't weak. However, they still frowned slightly. Grand Elder Dark Crane, since you have matters to attend to, we will take our leave first. However, please remember what you have promised. See you tomorrow. Scarlet Robe said as he stood up and left the hall with his companions. When Misha walked out of the hall, the corners of his mouth curled upwards. He shot a glance at Nangong Xuanhe, who had suddenly started roaring in the hall. He sneered and continued walking forward. The next day, Cloud Mist Restaurant. The sky quickly brightened, and rays of sunlight seeped through the cracks in the sky and illuminated Nangong Wuk's blood-stained face, causing the muscles on his face to involuntarily twitch. As he slowly opened his eyes, everything in front of him gradually became clear from the blurry state. Where am I? Am I not dead? Nangong Wuk couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air as he felt an intense pain in his waist. Nangong Xuanhe, that old dog, was actually so ruthless. Kicking a man's waist so ruthlessly, it was fatal. Where is this place? Nangong Wuk finally got a clear look at his surroundings, and he couldn't help but squint his eyes in confusion. It was clean and tidy, and it even emitted the fragrance of a woman's boudoir. Nangong Wuk immediately sat up from his bed. The injuries on his body were almost healed, and he took out an elixir from his spatial spirit tool. After eating the elixir, he silently revolved his true energy to digest the elixir. At the same time, he earnestly observed his surroundings. Nangong Wuk's complexion was extremely solemn and grave. Sure enough, this place was a woman's boudoir. Moreover, there were places in the boudoir that were covered with pink curtains, and the fragrance emitted from them was mesmerizing. Nangong Wuk could guess that the owner of this boudoir was a beautiful woman. But whose boudoir was this? Nangong Wuk still remembered that when he fainted, he was outside of Owner Bu's restaurant. Could it be that this was Owner Bu's room? Nangong Wuk sucked in a breath of cold air, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Owner Bu actually had such a young girl's heart? One really couldn't judge a book by its cover. Bu Fang's solemn expression and Bu Fang's solemn face appeared in his mind, and he imagined Bu Fang sitting on a small bed covered with pink curtains. That kind of charming and gentle, that kind of strange atmosphere caused Nangong Wuk to shiver. Just when Nangong Wuk was letting his imagination run wild, the door to the room was suddenly pushed open, and a person appeared at the door. A silhouette appeared at the entrance. It was Bu Fang, who Nangong Wuk had a strange feeling about. "You're awake?" Bu Fang calmly asked. Nangong Wuk widened his eyes, and he nodded his head repeatedly as he took a step back. Bu Fang was somewhat puzzled. Nangong Wuk's condition didn't seem right. Could it be that Nangong Xianying's kick on his waist yesterday had damaged his brain? Something still didn't seem right. "Forget it. Since you're awake, you should quickly come down. I have something to discuss with you." Bu Fang shot a glance at Nangong Wuk and said. After he spoke, he turned around and left the room. Nangong Wuk, who was leaning against a corner of the wall, let out a deep breath when he saw Bu Fang leave. "It was really too depressing. I didn't expect you to be like this, Owner Bu." Nangong Wuk found a water source in the room, and after he washed his body, he walked out of the room with his upper body bare. He didn't prepare any clothes in his spatial spirit tool, so he felt somewhat embarrassed. However, when he just walked out of the room, Bu Fang threw a piece of clothing at him. That piece of clothing was quite loose, and when it was put on his body, it exposed the white skin on his chest. Nangong Wuk pursed his lips and cautiously looked at Bu Fang. He was extremely vigilant. Bu Fang's gaze was somewhat strange, and it seemed like he found Nangong Wuk's gaze somewhat strange. "What's wrong?" Bu Fang calmly asked. "No, nothing." Nangong Wuk straightened his neck and replied with his eyes wide open. "I'm fine." "Come down then," Bu Fang said. Bu Fang didn't pay any more attention to him, and he walked toward the kitchen. After a short while, his figure disappeared. Nangong Wuk took a deep breath, and he walked down the stairs while wearing his robe. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, a fragrance wafted out. That fragrance was extremely rich, and it caused Nangong Wuk's heart to shiver. This smell. Was it the Buddha jumps over the wall soup? Sure enough, when he walked into the store, a jar of Buddha jumps over the wall soup was placed there. "Eat it. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup should be able to quickly heal your injuries. However, you still need to pay with crystals," Bu Fang said. Nangong Wuk nodded his head, and he sat on his seat and started to gorge himself on the food. The rich fragrance filled the air, and he ate until his mouth was covered with grease. Bu Fang pulled out a chair and sat beside Nangong Wuk. He stared at Nangong Wuk. This gaze, Nangong Wuk's body stiffened, and he turned his head with great difficulty to look at Bu Fang. He took a deep breath and his gaze became vigilant. "Owner Bu, Why are you staring at me? Nangong Wuk swallowed a chicken wing in his mouth, and he asked, Does your Nangong family have a quota to enter the secret realm? Bu Fang asked earnestly. Nangong Wuk was taken aback. He didn't expect that Bu Fang would ask such a question, and it was completely different from what he had expected. Of course we do. The Nangong family is a great family in Heavenly Mist City, and it controls the secret realm's teleportation array, so we naturally have a quota. However, we only have 2 extra quotas, and they are managed by the family head, Nangong Wuk said with a sigh. When he mentioned the Nangong family, his heart became slightly sorrowful. I need a quota to enter the secret realm, Bu Fang said earnestly. Puff, Nangong Wuk's heart was still sorrowful, but when he heard Bu Fang's sudden words, he almost spat out the chicken in his mouth. Owner Bu, don't make a fuss, your cultivation is too weak, Nangong Wuk said helplessly. Those who were qualified to enter the secret realm had to be at least at the 10th grade divine level, and they were experts who had broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles. Bu Fang was just an 8th grade war god. He didn't have the qualifications to enter, and what could he do with his cultivation? Aren't you the successor of the Nangong family? You have 2 quotas now. Can you bring me in? Bu Fang asked. Nangong Wuk drank a mouthful of the soup and took a deep breath. He shook his head resolutely. No. I can't let you throw your life away. You saved me, and that old dog Nangong Xuanhe must have a grudge against you. Once you enter the secret realm with me, that old dog won't let you off. Moreover, your cultivation is too weak. Bu Fang furrowed his brows, and Nangong Wuk's resolute attitude surprised him. Of course, if the system didn't issue a temporary mission for him, Bu Fang wouldn't have wanted to enter the secret realm. With his lazy personality, he might as well pull up a chair and sit in front of the shop to enjoy the sun when he entered the mystic realm. Temporary mission. Host, please enter the Cloud Sea secret realm and pick the Heaven grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup's ingredient, the 10th grade Spirit Herb Dragon Bone Transformation Grass. Mission reward, 20% energy conversion reward. This was the mission issued by the system after Bu Fang threw Nangong Wuk into Yang Meiji's room. There is a requirement to enter the secret realm? Bu Fang furrowed his brows. No. But I'm afraid that something might happen to you, Nangong Wuk said helplessly after he calmed down. He would definitely go to the secret realm, but he wouldn't bring Owner Bu with him. Once his injuries were more or less healed, he would fight for the quota that belonged to him. He was the successor of the Nangong family, and since the family head had passed away, the remaining quota belonged to him. This was something that belonged to him. Isn't it fine if I'm strong enough? Bu Fang expressionlessly looked at Nangong Wuk, and his gaze made the latter's hair stand on end. After Nangong Wuk nodded his head, the corners of Bu Fang's mouth curled up. Then, pay me the crystals for this Buddha jumps over the wall soup, Bu Fang said as he stood up. Nangong Wuk was taken aback. Owner Bu was going to turn his back on him. He still hadn't finished eating yet. However, he didn't care about it. He didn't have many other things, but he had brought a lot of crystals to eat Bu Fang's dishes. He took out 10,000 crystals. After Bu Fang received the 10,000 crystals, the system's notification resounded in his mind. Congratulations to the host for reaching the required turnover. Starting to upgrade. Chapter 448. Host. Bu Fang True Energy Cultivation Level. 9th Grade Cooking Talent. 4 stars Skills. Level 2 Meteor Cutting Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100. Gourmet Array, 1 out of 6. Tools. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok, God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Overall Evaluation. Intermediate Chef. Your cooking talent has reached a higher level, and your cooking skills have become more proficient. A wider world of cooking has opened up for you, and you can start cooking functional ingredient. System level, 9 stars, conversion ratio is at 100%, system reward, Overlord 13 blades knife technique, functional dish, vigorous beef meatball. When Bufang heard the system's notification that he had leveled up, he subconsciously opened the system's interface and started to look for information about himself. He could feel a faint wisp of true energy rushing into his body, and the instant it entered his body, it turned into dense true energy and entered his dantian. This time, the amount of energy that was converted into true energy was enormous, and this terrifying energy made Bufang slightly raise his brows. The true energy quickly rushed into the energy whirlpool in his dantian, and it caused the whirlpool to revolve faster and faster. Moreover, there seemed to be specks of light emitting from it. 9th grade Supreme Being. Bufang sighed inwardly. After Nangong Wuk bought the last Buddha jumps over the wall soup, his turnover had finally reached the system's requirements, and he could upgrade it. The system had also upgraded to 9 stars, and his true energy cultivation level had also reached the 9th grade Supreme Being level. The Supreme Being, who used to be high and mighty in his eyes, had now also reached the Supreme Being level. Bufang's heart, which was as calm as an ancient well, was slightly excited. Moreover, it seemed like he had also obtained many new skills from this upgrade. Overlord 13 blades. Just the name alone made it seem extremely domineering. This should be the knife technique, and Bufang's heart was filled with anticipation. His knife technique, which had stagnated for a long time, could finally be improved. He had already practiced the meteor knife technique to its limit, and it would be difficult for him to improve it. Now the Overlord 13 blades had appeared, and it gave Bufang a strange sense of novelty. Overlord 13 blades, advanced blade technique, can be used in battle. There are a total of 13 blades, and their power can be stacked. When the 13 blades are stacked, the power will be earth-shattering. Also, if you want to practice this blade, you must first practice your aura. The system's solemn and serious voice reached Bufang's ears. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Overlord 13 blades. It could be said that this was not just a simple knife technique. Following the advancement of Bufang's cultivation, the ingredients he would encounter in the future would be extremely powerful. The pressure emitted by some overlord-level spirit beasts was not something that could be completely suppressed by the Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife. At this moment, the effect of the Overlord 13 blades appeared. With the Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife and the Overlord 13 blades, Bufang would be able to handle these ingredients with ease. Squinting his eyes, Bufang began to ponder over the image of the Overlord 13 blades that the system had sent to his mind. Nangong Wuk held a chicken bone in his mouth. His clothes were unbuttoned, revealing his fair chest. He looked at Bufang in a daze. That was because he suddenly realized that Bufang's aura had undergone a huge change. In just an instant, Nangong Wuk realized that he could no longer recognize Bufang. Moreover, from the aura emitted by Bufang, it seemed like Owner Bu's cultivation was no longer at the 8th grade War God level. 9th grade Supreme Being? Becoming a Supreme Being in an instant? Was it really that easy to break through to the 9th grade Supreme Being level? Was this a joke? Nangong Wuk felt that his brain was unable to process the situation. A moment ago, he was still saying that Bufang's cultivation was insufficient. In the blink of an eye, Bufang gave him a breakthrough. Was Bufang going to break through the Supreme Being's shackles and become a 10th grade Divine Echelon expert? Fortunately, Bufang's aura did not undergo such a terrifying change. However, it was enough to make Nangong Wuk's heart beat wildly. If that's the case, is my strength sufficient? Bufang slowly opened his eyes and looked at Nangong Wuk with a faint smile on his face as he spoke. Nangong Wuk probably did not expect that Bufang would break through to the 9th grade Supreme Being level in an instant. Nangong Wuk spat out the chicken bone in his mouth and looked at Bufang as if he was looking at a monster. He clicked his tongue in wonder. He had already begun to suspect whether Owner Bu had intentionally suppressed his cultivation in order to humiliate him. However, thinking about it, Owner Bu would not be so bored. 9th grade Supreme Being. How is that enough? If you want to enter the secret realm, your cultivation must be at least at the level of breaking through one of the Supreme Being's shackles. Old Bu, even if you become a 9th grade Supreme Being, it is still insufficient. If you encounter a 10th grade Divine Echelon expert, you will definitely die, Nangong Wuk said earnestly. You really talk a lot of nonsense. You just need to take me in. As for my life and death, it will be up to fate, Bu Fong said with a frown. I can't. Old Bu, I really can't harm you. Nangong Wuk still wanted to persuade Bu Fong earnestly. However, shortly after, he felt a chill at the tip of his nose. Bu Fong patted the golden shrimpy on his shoulder, and the latter actually dashed forward. Its sickle-like claws emitted an ice-cold aura as it aimed at Bu Fong. Xiaopi's compound eyes rolled around and it waved its sickle-like claws as if it was threatening Bu Fong. Shut up, Nangong Wuk waved his hand and smiled. Bu Fong didn't smile, and neither did Xiaopi. Didn't you want to know how Nangong Xianying died? He was killed by this little guy, Bu Fong said calmly. This little guy. Old Bu also learned how to joke. This brother could eat 10 of this little guy with one hand. Nangong Wuk curled up the corners of his mouth and stared at Xiaopi as he laughed weirdly. Shrimpy seemed to have sensed the mockery on Nangong Wuk's face, and it immediately got scared. It waved its sickle-like claws, and a tearing sound was emitted. The air was directly torn apart, and a sonic boom resounded. It streaked across the tip of Nangong Wuk's nose as fast as lightning, cutting off a strand of his hair, causing it to flutter in the air. Nangong Wuk's pupils shrank as he felt a chill run down his spine. This little guy's speed was so fast that he almost failed to catch it. I am serious. I will help you recover from your injuries, and you will take me to the secret realm, Bu Fong said earnestly. When Nangong Wuk sensed that Bu Fong wasn't joking, he frowned and smiled bitterly. To be honest, I also want to take you to the secret realm, but you should know that my position in the Nangong family is no longer the same as before. I don't have the confidence to take you there, Nangong Wuk said. He really didn't have the confidence, but he still wanted to give it a try. This was something that belonged to him, and he wanted to take it back. I believe that you can do it. You can do it. Bu Fong expressionlessly raised his hand, clenched his fist, and pressed it down. Nangong Wuk was speechless. Then, Bu Fong seemed to have tacitly agreed that Nangong Wuk would take him there. He turned around and opened his store, starting his daily business. Heavenly Mist City, the center of the city. Presently, the vast Sky Mist Square was a boiling cauldron of voices, and it was extremely bustling with people. All the seats in the plaza were occupied, and every seat was occupied. Their faces were filled with excitement as they looked at the arena in the center of the plaza, which was surrounded by a huge array. There were flickering figures on the arena, and terrifying waves of true energy were unceasingly surging around. Various factions were fighting over the quotas to enter the secret realm. It seemed like it was already in full swing. The Lin family, Zhang family, and Nangong family were the top families in the Heavenly Mist City. Even the Heavenly Mist City Lord didn't dare to offend these three families. After all, these three families were deeply rooted in the Heavenly Mist City. Nangong Xuanhe's face was gloomy as he sat on the high seat. Nangong Wuk was forced to leave by him, and the Nangong family's patriarch was killed. There were two reasons for his gloomy expression. One was because of Nangong Xianying's death, and the other was because the Nangong family's disciples didn't even win a single battle. This was really too shameful. Fortunately, the Nangong family still had 2 quotas. Otherwise, these disciples wouldn't even be able to get a single quota. Sirs from the ancient Shura city, the rest will depend on you too. We must get the remaining 5 quotas. Nangong Xuanhe took a deep breath and turned his head to look at the two blood-robed experts sitting in the distance. No problem. Just remember to give us the 2 quotas that only your Nangong family has. As for the remaining 5 quotas, we will definitely help you get them. The bewitching Misha, who was wrapped in a blood-red robe, said with a smile. Her fiery red lips curled upwards as if she had just drunk a mouthful of fresh blood. Nangong Xuanhe heaved a sigh of relief when he got Misha's confirmation. If the 2 of them didn't help, it would be impossible for the Nangong family to get the remaining 5 quotas. If that happened, the Nangong family would only have 2 quotas. It would be extremely awkward. With the help of the ancient Shura city's experts, the Nangong family would have a total of 7 quotas. This deal wasn't a loss. Once they entered the Cloud Sea secret realm, they would be able to use the secret information they obtained to help the Nangong family rise quickly. This time's secret realm was different from the previous ones. In the distance, the people from the Pill Tower arrived. Yang Meiji's majestic body followed behind a stooped old man. Everyone looked at the stooped old man with respect. This person was the Heavenly Mist City's Pill Tower's elder, a 3 Clouds alchemist, Grandmaster Xian Bei. He had an outstanding status in the Heavenly Mist City. This time, he also chose to enter the Cloud Sea secret realm. In the past, he didn't choose to enter the secret realm. However, no one objected to him entering the secret realm. After all, he was a person of virtue and prestige, and it was only right for him to have some privileges. Of course, even if there were people who objected, there weren't many of them. A gust of wind blew past them. The battles on the stage became more and more exciting. This was because more and more experts were making their move. At the entrance, 2 figures slowly entered the arena. Nangong Wuk was speechless as he looked at Bufang, who was beside him. He felt a headache coming on. This old Bu really followed them here. Old Bu, later on, you will follow behind me. Don't act recklessly, Nangong Wuk instructed him earnestly. Okay. Bufang nodded. After seeing Bufang nod, Nangong Wuk took a deep breath and pushed open the bronze gate. Only then did Nangong Wuk take a deep breath and push open the bronze gate at the entrance. Nangong Wuk's gaze became extremely ice-cold. Nangong Wuk's gaze became extremely cold. It was time to settle some scores. Chapter 449. Is this an expert from the ancient Shura city? Xiao Chongyun, who was seated in the Lin family's camp, narrowed his eyes as he watched the 2 blood-robed experts slowly walk onto the arena. They wore blood-red robes and emitted a baleful aura. These were the characteristics of the ancient Shura city's experts. Almost everyone knew them. The puppet sex expert was a sinister-looking man who was wrapped in a black cloak. His facial expression couldn't be seen clearly, but his scarlet eyes were emitting an eerie radiance as he stared at the 2 people from the ancient Shura city, who were standing in the center of the arena. The corners of Misha's mouth curled up in an exaggerated manner. His hair fluttered in the wind, causing their blood-red robes to flutter. Who wants to fight with us? Mas said. His voice was a little hoarse, and it reverberated throughout the entire Sky Mist Square. Damn it! Why would the Nangong family invite people from the ancient Shura city? This doesn't make sense. The faces of the people from the Lin and Zhang families turned ashen. They had thought that they would definitely be able to win, but who would have thought that an expert from the ancient Shura city would appear out of nowhere? It seemed that the Lin family and the Zhang family were not fated to get the 5 spot. However, it was still a good thing for them, as they had already obtained a lot of quotas. Even though they weren't able to obtain those 5 quotas, it wasn't a big deal. It was just that they didn't have many quotas left after dividing the quotas with the experts of the Wind and Thunder Pavilion and the Puppet Sect. The Nangong family still had 2 quotas that originally belonged to them. This way, the Nangong family had 7 quotas. Damn it! This time, the Nangong family had taken the lead. The experts of the Lin family and the Zhang family smashed their fists on the table unwillingly. The two experts from the ancient Shura city walked down the stage and returned to the Nangong family's position. As the battles continued, the allocation of the remaining quotas was quickly completed. After all the quotas were allocated, the Heavenly Mist City's city lord walked to the center of the arena and began to announce the final quotas. The Cloud Sea Secret Realm could be said to be the most important thing in Heavenly Mist City. These quotas had also become very important. When the Heavenly Mist City's city lord announced who the slots belonged to, the entire plaza burst into an uproar. Creak, a heavy and ancient voice rang out. Two clear footsteps slowly resounded through the entire Heavenly Mist Square. The sound of his footsteps was not loud, but as his footsteps resounded, it caused the clamor in the square to die down. Gazes after gazes landed on that figure. Nangong Wuk. Hiss. Wasn't Nangong Wuk already dead? The successor of the Nangong family? Why is he here? After the initial silence, everyone in the square burst into an uproar. The clamor continued. The Nangong family announced to the outside world that Nangong Wuk was seriously injured and on the verge of death. It was precisely because of this that the Nangong family's two fixed quotas were given to Nangong Xuanhe. However, Nangong Xuanhe wasn't the true successor. Once the true successor appeared, those two quotas would belong to Nangong Wuk. Bufang and Nangong Wuk weren't intimidated by the clamor around them. The former was calmness. Nangong Xuanhe's gaze was fixed on Nangong Xuanhe, and killing intent filled the air. Old dog, you didn't expect that I would appear here, did you? I'm here to collect my debt, Nangong Wuk said coldly. His voice didn't drown out the clamor, but it was clearly transmitted to Nangong Xuanhe's ears. Everyone looked at him with an odd gaze. It was really very strange and weird. Nangong Xuanhe's expression changed. He stood up from his seat and suppressed his aura as he coldly said, "The Nangong family's quotas have already been allocated. What's left is our family's business. Let's go back and talk about it. Don't disgrace yourself." The quotas have already been allocated? Everyone sneered inwardly. They admired Nangong Xuanhe's shamelessness. His skin was really thick. Bufang calmly swept his gaze over the crowd. He didn't show any emotion. Nangong Wuk raised his finger and pointed at Nangong Xuanhe. He curled up the corners of his mouth and said disdainfully, "Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to allocate those two fixed quotas? What qualifications do you have? You are just an old dog who betrayed the Nangong family. Family matters? Who the hell wants to talk about family matters with you? You little bastard." Nangong Xuanhe was so angry that his beard trembled. He glared at Nangong Wuk. He stretched out a finger, which was trembling. "Don't point at me. I didn't come here to reason with you today. I also didn't come here to discuss family matters with you. I came here to ask for the quotas," Nangong Wuk said. As the successor of the Nangong family, he should have the right to allocate those two quotas. There was no need to doubt it. No one could doubt it, let alone an old dog like Nangong Xuanhe. "I have already allocated the quotas for you," Nangong Xuanhe said. "Who do you think you are? Scram! I want to allocate them myself. How could my Nangong family's quotas be given to just anyone?" Nangong Wuk raised his chin and said arrogantly, "You!" Nangong Xuanhe was furious. However, just as he was about to say something, the members of the Lin and Zhang families stood up and laughed. They were really happy. They didn't expect that Nangong Xuanhe wouldn't kill Nangong Wuk. Wasn't he just digging a hole for himself to jump into? He even buried himself in it. He wanted to be the master of the Nangong family without a proper reason. He was simply a retard. They naturally wouldn't let go of such an opportunity to step on him. Since Master Wuk is still alive, the Nangong family isn't something that you, Nangong Xuanhe, can decide. The Lin family's patriarch said. The Zhang family's patriarch couldn't help but agree with him. Nangong Xuanhe was so angry that his whole body trembled. However, he couldn't say anything. He originally thought that Nangong Wuk would be seriously injured after his second brother died. He thought that it would be impossible for him to appear on the stage. Everything was going according to plan. However, he didn't consider Nangong Wuk's recovery speed. Elder Xuanhe? What do you mean? It turns out that you can't decide the Nangong family. Misha squinted his eyes and looked at Nangong Xuanhe. Don't say any more. In any case, we are going to take these 2 quotas. The deal we agreed on has already been completed. If you don't give me these 2 quotas, the Nangong family will have to bear the wrath of my ancient Shura city. Misha glanced at Nangong Xuanhe and sneered. I don't care who you are. These 2 quotas belong to me, Nangong Wuk. I will give them to whoever I want. Why are you trying to interfere? Nangong Wuk said. After he finished speaking, he pulled Bufang, who was beside him. I will now announce that the Nangong family has 2 quotas. One belongs to me and the other belongs to this person. Bufang expressionlessly looked at the crowd and nodded slightly. That's right. It's me. The crowd was dumbfounded. They all vomited blood. That's right? Who the F***ck are you? The sudden change in the situation confused the crowd. Where did this youth come from? Why was he able to take one of the quotas? Are you joking with me? Misha, who was wearing a blood-red robe, coldly looked at Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk was fearless. He widened his eyes and glared at Misha. Why would I joke with you? These 2 quotas belong to me. Do you have a problem with it? Why would you have a problem with it? Nangong Wuk was like a scoundrel. The crowd was somewhat speechless. Yang Meiji, who was sitting beside Master Xianbei, had her eyes lit up. She clenched her fists and her eyes were filled with stars. He's too handsome. Young Master Wuk is too handsome. Some people recognized Bufang and started screaming. I recognize him. That youth is the owner of the multi-taste fasting pill in the Nangong family's area. That stench. I don't even dare to approach that place. Owner? Is he the owner of that restaurant? That restaurant's owner really has some shady dealings with the Nangong family. Is he really Nangong Wan's husband? Oh my God! The exclamations were incessant, rising and falling one after another. The competition for the quota this time was really too exciting. The Heavenly Mist City's City Lord stood on the stage and announced the ownership of the Nangong family's 2 quotas. They naturally belonged to Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk was indeed the Nangong family's successor. Nangong Xuanhe was extremely unwilling and he almost roared in anger. The ancient Shura city's expert coldly looked at him and said, out of the remaining 5 quotas, my ancient Shura city must take 2. Otherwise I will kill you. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left, ignoring Nangong Xuanhe's expression. Nangong Xuanhe's heart ached. He hated Nangong Wuk even more now. His hatred for Bufang, who had healed Nangong Wuk's injuries, grew even deeper. If he wasn't mistaken, Nangong Wuk's second brother must have been killed by that restaurant's owner. The fact that Nangong Wuk was able to recover so quickly was definitely related to that restaurant. Damn it! What kind of joke was that? Everyone dispersed. The secret realm's teleportation would take place at night, so the people who had obtained the quotas went back to make preparations. They entered the secret realm to obtain benefit. It would be best if they could increase their strength. In the secret realm, danger and opportunity coexisted. Ayaya! Nangong Wuk, you are really awe-inspiring. I heard that your heaven and earth obsidian flame was extracted. Can you still refine elixirs? It's fine even if you can't refine it. In any case, you will be my brother-in-law in the future. If you need any elixirs, you can look for me. I won't be stingy. If there's soup for me to drink, there will definitely be scraps for you to eat. A man wearing a white coat slowly walked over. He had oily hair and a powdered face, and he sneered at Nangong Wuk. Mu Chenfeng, you are still so disgusting. With your alchemy skills, the things you refine are like sh*t. I'm afraid that I will become retarded if I eat them. Nangong Wuk glanced at the powdered man and replied in disdain. Moreover, a trap like you wants to marry my sister? Do you know that my real brother-in-law is here? Nangong Wuk raised his head and pulled over Bufang, who was standing beside him. The latter's face was filled with confusion. Mu Chenfeng squinted his eyes and looked at Bufang. He chuckled while covering his mouth with his palm. While laughing, he turned around and walked away. Bufang blinked his eyes. Nangong Wuk couldn't help but look at Bufang. Old Bu, is he looking down on you? Bufang expressionlessly looked at him. Oh, you can guess. Chapter 450. Bufang and Nangong Wuk returned to the store. Nangong Wuk had been expelled from the Nangong family and had no place to stay. Even his spot in the pill tower was revoked by that old dog, Nangong Xuanhe. Since he couldn't go to the pill tower, Nangong Wuk could only follow Bufang. Let's get ready. The teleportation array will be activated tonight when the two moons intersect. At that time, we will be able to enter the Cloud Sea secret realm. After Nangong Wuk returned to the store, he slumped down on a chair and crossed his legs as he spoke. Bufang calmly looked at him. Only then did Nangong Wuk feel somewhat uncomfortable, so he put his leg down. Old Bu, are you really going to enter the secret realm? Nangong Wuk solemnly asked. It's true, Bufang replied as he pulled out a chair and curled up on it. This was the system's mission and it was related to the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Bufang had no choice but to go. Of course, he had to enter for the sake of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The mortal-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup cost 10,000 crystals. However, Bufang wasn't willing to give up. After all, after so many days of business, Bufang discovered that the consumption level of the Heavenly Mist City was much higher than that of the Light Wind Imperial City. He only made 2 servings of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup every day. However, there were still people who wanted to buy it every day. Of course, the main reason was that the taste of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup was too attractive. However, the consumption level of the Heavenly Mist City was also high. In order to increase his cultivation level, Bufang had to research more expensive dishes. The mortal-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was no longer enough to satisfy Bufang. His target was the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He believed that the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup would not disappoint him. Sigh. Once you enter the Cloud Sea secret realm, you will be in great danger, Nangong Wuk sighed. You should be in even more danger than me, Bufang earnestly said as he looked at Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk was stunned. Bufang was right. There were many people in Heavenly Mist City who wanted to kill him. Putting aside that old dog Nangong Xuanhe, even the Lin and Zhang families, even though they had helped him so much previously, once he entered the secret realm, they would definitely kill him ruthlessly. After all, compared to that old dog Nangong Xuanhe, Nangong Wuk's talent was much more terrifying. Once it was allowed to grow, it would become a nightmare for the Lin and Zhang families. Moreover, this was the best opportunity to get rid of Nangong Wuk. If they missed this opportunity, they would have to think twice before they wanted to kill him again. Nangong Wuk felt that what he had said was pointless. Old Bu's insight was much more thorough than his. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes lit up. He looked at Bufang and said, Old Bu, do you still have the ramen you made last time? That ramen can actually increase my fighting strength. It's simply incredible. It's even more effective than the 1-mark spirit pill I refined. Moreover, it didn't have any side effects. He recalled the bowl of ramen. Although the ramen was extremely spicy, after eating the ramen, his fighting strength increased sharply. This was a fact. Most importantly, it didn't have any side effect. If swollen lips were considered a side effect, then Nangong Wuk would be willing to suffer from it every day. This time, there's something good. You stay outside, I'll go and make some new dishes to prepare for entering the secret realm. Bufang glanced at Nangong Wuk, turned around and walked toward the kitchen. In just a short while, he disappeared. New dishes? Nangong Wuk's eyes lit up, and he was extremely excited. Vigorous beef meatball, utility dish. After using it, it can increase the consumer's physical strength by 3 times, and his explosive strength by 3 times. It can be used to set up a gourmet array. It can be eaten together with the Rampage ramen. Eating it alone will not have any side effects, but eating it together will make the consumer weak for 6 hours. In front of the stove, Bufang stood quietly. In his mind, he was thinking about the new utility dish, the vigorous beef meatball. At this moment, Bufang really wanted to complain about the system's trashy naming ability. Vigorous beef meatball. Just hearing the name made people lose their appetite. Vigorous beef meatball. It was such a coquettish name. The cooking method of the vigorous beef meatball wasn't that difficult, and it was similar to ordinary meatballs. The only difference was the choice of ingredient. This time, the ingredients were provided by the system. It saved him a lot of trouble. Taking out the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, Bufang thought about how to use the Overlord 13 blade. In fact, if he wanted to use the Overlord 13 blades, he must practice the meteor knife technique to its peak. Only when the meteor knife technique reached its peak would he be able to comprehend the Overlord 13 blade. This was because the Overlord 13 blades wasn't just an ordinary knife technique. It was a knife technique that paid particular attention to aura. What was aura? Bufang didn't really understand it, and he needed to comprehend it by himself. Every expert had their own imposing manner, and everyone's imposing manner was slightly different. This aura was different from pressure. The so-called pressure was a kind of pressure that came from using true energy. This kind of pressure had an absolute effect on people with low cultivation. However, for people with high cultivation, it was useless. However, aura was different. If a person had aura, his spirit, energy, and spirit would be different. Why were swordsmen called swordsmen? It was because every one of them learned aura, and every one of them was an expert in using aura. Sword intent was also a kind of aura, and it belonged to swordsmen. Once a swordsman condensed sword intent, there would be a kind of sharp and indomitable feeling. This kind of feeling would make people feel that it was extremely sharp. What Bufang wanted to condense was the aura of the Overlord 13 blades. It was a very difficult process. He pulled Xiaopi off his shoulder and placed her on the stove. Bufang held the golden dragon bone kitchen knife, narrowed his eyes, and stared at Xiaopi. Xiaopi, I'm going to use aura. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, you can jump back to my shoulder, Bufang said seriously. His tone wasn't small. Xiaopi snorted, waving his sickle claw. It seemed to be very excited. Overlord 13 blades, Overlord's aura, the first blade. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife spun rapidly in Bufang's hand, creating many dazzling knife light. Ordinary people would be dazzled if they stared at it. Pow! After displaying the extremely cool knife skills for a while, Bufang stopped the knife lights and grabbed the knife handle. Xiaopi lay on the table, raising his upper body. He blinked his compound eyes, and his sickle claw slightly moved, showing that his heart wasn't affected at all. What? Bufang narrowed his eyes. The effect was too weak? Then let's do it again. Xiaopi, you're scared. King Qian, don't force yourself. Swish. 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 Firmly holding the knife handle, Bufang felt that he should be very cool at this moment. His knife skills had almost reached the acme of perfection, and the kitchen knife seemed to have fused with his body. Bufang's moves were like stormy waves. Xiaopi watched calmly. He waved his sickle claw, showing that his heart wasn't affected at all. Bufang put away his kitchen knife, expressionlessly glancing at Xiaopi, who didn't give him any face. He pulled the latter back to his shoulder, then started to process the beef and make the vigorous beef meatballs. The Overlord's aura. He could take it slow. Rumble waves of heat rolled out from the Black Turtle constellation walk. After the cold heavenly mountain spirit spring water was boiled, it released a sweet and cold smell that made Bufang a little addicted. Bufang poured the freshly made beef meatballs into the wok. Thump 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 thump. The beef meatballs entered the wok, rolling along with the wave. In just a short while, the bright red color turned into the tender color of meat. In just a short while, a pure meaty aroma filled the air. It was the unique aroma of beef. Bufang really enjoyed this aroma. Bufang scooped out bowls of beef meatballs from the wok. These meatballs seemed to have come to life, and their surfaces seemed to be flickering with radiance. They were extremely dazzling. Spirit energy and aroma floated around the surface of the beef meatballs. They didn't add any ingredients, and they were just the original beef meatballs. Bufang looked at them and slightly nodded his head. Don't look down on these meatballs, which seemed a little ordinary. Only Bufang himself knew how much effort he had put into it. He had to control his true energy to make the permeating spirit energy fuse perfectly with the meat, and he had to make sure that the spirit energy didn't dissipate. This was extremely difficult. After taking a deep breath, Bufang carried a bowl of beef meatballs out of the kitchen and went to the store. Finally, it was you. Nangong Wuk waited anxiously until he finally saw Bufang carrying the dish out of the kitchen. He was really looking forward to it. He didn't know what Bufang's new dish would be. Old Bu's new dish. It shouldn't disappoint him, right? Nangong Wuk thought to himself. Then, he saw Bufang place a porcelain bowl in front of him. Within the porcelain bowl were beef meatballs that were overflowing with radiance and spirit energy. However, although the meatballs were beautiful, weren't they just F***king meatballs? Could they even be considered a dish? Chapter 451. Nangong Wuk's eyes widened as he looked at the glowing beef meatball. This new dish didn't require much skill. However, Old Bu's dish shouldn't be an ordinary dish. Nangong Wuk's heart shook as he thought of Bufang's various miracles. He immediately grinned. Since Old Bu dared to take out this dish, it meant that this dish had something special about it. Try it. This dish is called Vigorous Beef Meatball, Bufang said. Vigorous Beef Meatball? Who came up with this name? Could it be any more unsophisticated? This was simply the same as those inferior elixirs. Could this dish really taste good? Under Bufang's encouraging gaze, Nangong Wuk carefully picked up a beef meatball with his chopstick. The radiance on the meatball gradually dimmed. An aroma quietly spread out from the meatball. It wasn't thick, but it was like a strand of silk. It was as if one was dreaming about it. It's actually quite fragrant, Nangong Wuk muttered. Then, he casually threw the entire meatball into his mouth, just like how he usually ate elixirs. Nangong Wuk's eyes widened as he stuffed a vigorous beef meatball into his mouth. How's the taste? Bufang curiously asked. You're a chef, yet you're asking me how it tastes? Nangong Wuk was dumbfounded. What did Old Bu mean? Nangong Wuk looked at Bufang with a strange gaze. Why did he feel that Bufang was so unreliable? Slurp, Nangong Wuk fiercely bit down, and the vigorous beef meatball was instantly crushed. A rich fragrance permeated the air, and a stream of scalding water spurted out from Nangong Wuk's mouth. What the hell? Nangong Wuk was startled, and his heart trembled. However, the taste of this meatball was really not bad. The feeling of the water splashing around made Nangong Wuk excited. He was actually excited to eat a dish. As expected of Old Bu. Any dish in his hands was like a flower. Munch munch. Nangong Wuk quickly chewed, nodding his head as he chewed. The taste is really not bad. Old Bu's products are definitely of the highest quality. Nangong Wuk didn't boast nor diss as he praised Old Bu. Don't be anxious, use your heart to feel the changes in your body. Bufang's mouth twitched as he said. Nangong Wook was taken aback. His body's transformation? After a short while, Nangong Wook's hair stood on end and his eyes widened. He felt a warm current flowing from his lower abdomen to his surroundings. It was as if his entire body was wrapped in a warm liquid. That feeling made him feel very strange. What's going on? Nangong Wook was surprised. This was because he discovered that after eating the meatball, his muscles seemed to swell up. The heat flowed into his limbs and bones, causing his entire body to become a little more majestic. Cha! Old Boo's meatballs had the effect of changing one's figure? Why was he researching this kind of meatball? Nangong Wook was startled. As Nangong Wook recalled the pink room in his mind, he suddenly shuddered. The warm current in his body became more and more intense, and he felt his physical strength becoming more and more powerful. It was as if he could crush everything with a light pinch. This illusion made Nangong Wook somewhat dazed. His fist smashed out and the air suddenly crackled from the impact. His physical strength was actually about 3 times stronger than before. Was this the effect of the meatball? Nangong Wook was pleasantly surprised, and he looked at Bufang with a gaze filled with surprise. He didn't expect that this unassuming meatball could actually increase one's physical strength. It was simply inconceivable. Wasn't physical strength something that could only be obtained through hard work and cultivation? This surging feeling of power made Nangong Wook somewhat intoxicated. Bufang nodded his head in satisfaction. This time, he actually succeeded in making the vigorous beef meatball on his first try, which saved him a lot of trouble. He also picked up a meatball and put it into his mouth. When he bit down, the juice splashed out and the aroma filled the air. After chewing for a while and swallowing it, Bufang slightly narrowed his eyes. He felt his whole body's strength suddenly surge. It was indeed effective. Bufang was pleasantly surprised. Then, he put away the bowl of meatballs. This was the preparation for entering the secret realm. With the rampage ramen and the vigorous beef meatball, the two of them would become even more powerful. Nangong Wook's heart was suddenly filled with excitement. He excitedly went to prepare for entering the secret realm. He suddenly looked forward to entering the secret realm. By relying on the vigorous beef meatball and the rampage ramen, he might be able to kill that old dog Nangong Xuanha. When Nangong Wook thought about killing that old dog, he was so excited that he couldn't sleep. After preparing for half a day, Nangong Wook and Bufang went out of the house. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered as he followed Bufang. Xiaopi lay lazily on Bufang's shoulder and continued to sleep. When Bufang and Nangong Wook arrived at the bronze building of the Nangong family, many people had already gathered in front of the teleportation array at the top of the building. This was the teleportation array that would send them into the Cloud Sea secret realm. This teleportation array was controlled by the Nangong family. However, because the Nangong family was still relatively weak, facing pressure from all sides, they had no choice but to share the mystic realm. If a family wanted to swallow a mystic realm, it was still too difficult. Bufang and Nangong Wook casually stepped into the building. The floor was bustling with noise and excitement. Almost everyone who had obtained a spot to enter the secret realm had come. Many people recognized Bufang and Nangong Wook. These two people were the most influential people in the world. Especially Bufang. A 9th-grade supreme martial artist actually dared to fight with Divine Body Realm experts for this opportunity. Him entering the mystic realm was a complete waste of the quota. No one knew what Nangong Wook was thinking. He actually wasted such an important quota. A gaze filled with killing intent locked onto Bufang and Nangong Wook, causing the two of them to feel slightly baffled. Turning their heads around, they discovered Nangong Xuanha, who was standing in the distance. Nangong Xuanha's face was gloomy and the muscles on the corners of his mouth were twitching. It seemed like he was extremely angry. Bufang directly ignored him. As for Nangong Wook, he grinned and pointed his middle finger at Nangong Xuanhe. The teleportation array quickly flickered with light. A rumbling sound came from the roof of the Nangong family's building. The bronze screen was slowly opened and revealed the boundless sky. 2 crescent moons were in the sky. They were slowly approaching each other, and it seemed like they would soon fuse together. Everyone was waiting for the right moment. They were all staring at the 2 crescent moons in the sky. The 2 crescent moons gradually fused together. Everyone couldn't help but breathe heavily. The fluctuations coming from the teleportation array became more and more obvious and intense. A rumbling sound resounded. A beam of light fell from the 2 crescent moons and shone on the center of the array. The light immediately overflowed. The array shook intensely and the air above it started to distort. Everyone held their breaths as they stared at the void. A tearing sound echoed. It was as if a curtain had been torn apart. A huge crack appeared in the sky. That crack emitted a white radiance, and the fluctuations coming from it were extremely intense. That crack was huge, and it wasn't any smaller than the Nangong family's building. It seemed like the entire heavenly mist city could see that crack, and it gave rise to many cries of alarm. When the fluctuations stabilized, someone couldn't sit still anymore. With a loud boom, Zhang Xian's Zhenqi gushed out, and he shot toward the rift. It seemed like this was the beginning, and the others started to clamor. Their gazes were filled with greed and fervor as they soared into the sky and entered the secret realm. 2 experts from the ancient Shura city, who were wrapped in blood-red robes, emitted an overflowing blood energy as they soared into the sky and entered the crack. Their eyes were filled with fervor and excitement. Shura Tower. I Misha am coming. Nangong Xuanhe tapped the ground with his feet and his body slowly floated into the sky. Don't let me see the 2 of you in the secret realm. Otherwise, I will tear the 2 of you to shreds. I will smash your flesh into meat paste and feed it to the spirit beasts in the secret realm. Nangong Xuanhe coldly stared at Nangong Wuk and Bu Fong as he spoke coldly. Old dog. Don't worry. When I enter the secret realm, the first person I will look for is you. I will tear you to shreds, but I won't feed you to the spirit beasts because they are innocent and I don't want your flesh to disgust them. Nangong Wuk retorted without any fear. You have a sharp tongue. Just you wait. You won't come out of the secret realm alive, Nangong Xuanhe sneered. White flames surged out of his body and engulfed him as if he was a man made of fire. He quickly entered the crack. Nangong Wuk clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with killing intent. That white flame was his heaven and earth obsidian flame. This old dog. Damn it. After calming down, Nangong Wuk and Bu Fong prepared to enter the crack. A figure carrying a pitch-black bronze chest looked at Bu Fong, who was standing behind Xiao Bai. His gaze was so profound that it made Bu Fong shudder. What an interesting puppet! I hope to meet you in the secret realm, the puppet sex expert said calmly. After he finished speaking, he carried the bronze chest and stepped into the crack. The Grand Baron sex experts and the Wind and Thunder Pavilions expert. The puppet sect, Heavenly Pill City, Heavenly Shine City, and many other experts entered the secret realm. Nangong Wuk and Bu Fong glanced at each other before they also entered the crack. The radiance was extremely dazzling. As soon as they entered the crack, they felt an intense impact. They couldn't see anything in front of them as it was just a vast expanse of whiteness. After traveling for a long time, they finally felt a shadow. Bu Fong felt as if he was wandering in a vast expanse of whiteness and he didn't know where he was going. After a long time, a loud rumbling sound echoed. Bu Fong's body rushed out of the shackles that bound him. A monstrous wave fell from the sky and smashed into Bu Fong's body. Bu Fong didn't even have time to react before he was sent flying. Xiaopi, who was on Bu Fong's shoulder, wasn't able to keep his balance and he was sent flying in the air. With a splash, Bu Fong fell into the water. After spitting out a few bubbles, Bu Fong came out of the water. A dense spiritual energy pervaded the air, causing Bufang's pores to slightly open up. This was the Cloud Sea secret realm. Bang! Bang! Water splashed everywhere as Bufang crawled out of the water. As soon as he stepped on the surface of the water, his surroundings exploded. A giant shadow rushed out of the water. It emitted a monstrous fishy smell and roars as it pounced toward Bufang. Chapter 452. The sound of water splashing resounded as a tall and mighty black figure appeared. Its snorting sound was deafening. It was a giant tiger-headed fish. Its head was like that of a berserk spirit tiger, and it was filled with a tyrannical aura. Its scarlet eyes stared fixedly at Bufang. It opened its sinister mouth, and a fishy stench flowed out of its sharp teeth. Bufang stood on the surface of the water and raised his head. He saw the giant tiger-headed fish, and a fishy stench assaulted his nostrils. Is that a supreme beast? Bufang was slightly surprised. He didn't expect that he would encounter a supreme beast that wanted to attack him the moment he entered the secret realm. Moreover, this supreme beast seemed to be extremely ferocious. Roar! The tiger-headed fish actually let out a roar that caused the entire forest to tremble. Then, the tiger-headed fish fiercely bit down on Bufang. It wanted to bite Bufang into pieces. Green smoke curled up and the black turtle constellation Wak appeared in Bufang's hand. Bufang slightly furrowed his brows as he held the black turtle constellation Wak with one hand. A loud bang resounded. The black turtle constellation Wak ruthlessly smashed onto the tiger-headed fish's head. The surface of the water fluctuated intensely and waves soared into the sky. The tiger-headed fish was sent flying and its blood splattered everywhere. The tiger-headed fish was somewhat dumbfounded. With a splash, it fell into the water. It roared and once again charged toward Bufang. However, the black turtle constellation Wak smashed down once again and sent it flying. After being smashed several times, the tiger-headed fish flipped its belly and floated on the surface of the water. It didn't want to live anymore. Bufang's true energy covered the sole of his feet as he slowly strode forward. He grabbed the tiger-headed fish's tail and walked toward the shore. In just a short while, he had reached the shore. The waves slapped against the shore and emitted splashing sounds. The huge body of the tiger-headed fish was thrown onto the shore by Bufang. Bufang circled around the tiger-headed fish and sized it up. This fish was very big and had a lot of meat. Bufang found the best spot and used the dragon bone kitchen knife to cut off a big piece of meat. In the past, a supreme beast was still a threat to Bufang. However, as Bufang stepped into the supreme being realm, the might of the black turtle constellation Wak became even more terrifying. It became much easier to deal with supreme beasts. Once again, Bufang took out the black turtle constellation Wak and spat out a mouthful of 10,000 bestial flames. Bufang sat down cross-legged and began to cook the tiger-head meat. The soup in the wok bubbled as steam filled the air. In a short while, the fish soup was cooked and its aroma filled the air. This tiger-head meat was called fish meat, but it was a little different. It was not fish meat, but it had the fishy smell of fish meat. The texture was a little strange. After cooking for a while, Bufang began to gorge himself. It was unknown when Xiao Bai appeared behind Bufang, but his purple eyes flickered. Nangong Wuk felt as though his luck had run out in Bufang's store. He was separated from Bufang during the teleportation and was teleported to a separate region. In this region, he met several familiar faces. Nangong Xuanhe looked at Nangong Wuk in a daze. However, he quickly came back to his senses. He never expected that Nangong Wuk would be teleported to the region he was in. Nangong Xuanhe was both excited and amused. Even the heavens don't want to help you. Nangong Xuanhe laughed. His laughter became colder and colder. In the surroundings there were many experts from other families. Among them, the Lin and Zhang families were looking at Nangong Wuk with a playful gaze. They knew about the conflict between Nangong Xuanhe and Nangong Wuk. However, they never expected that Nangong Wuk would be so unlucky to meet Nangong Xuanhe the moment he entered the secret realm. How unlucky was he? Bang! In an instant, Nangong Xuanhe's body emitted a monstrous killing intent. Everyone, if you can help me kill this bastard, I, Nangong Xuanhe, will definitely reward you handsomely, Nangong Xuanhe said. His voice was like a morning bell that resounded in the surroundings. Many experts from the Lin and Zhang families were tempted by his offer. The Nangong family was, after all, a great family in Heavenly Mist City. If they could reward him handsomely, then the reward wouldn't be too bad. Therefore, in an instant, streams of aura gushed out. The people in the surroundings all looked at Nangong Wuk with mocking killing intent. It was as though 10,000 mantis shrimps were floating in front of him. Nangong Wuk was somewhat speechless. How could he be so unlucky? Old dog, you are really shameless. If you have the ability, then let's fight one-on-one. Don't call for help, Nangong Wuk said coldly. Nangong Wuk's gaze was like lightning, and his aura was majestic. His whole body seemed like an unsheathed sword, which was incomparably sharp. Nangong Xuanhe laughed in disdain. Do you think that I am afraid of you? Nangong Xuanhe sneered. He was an expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. How could he be afraid of an expert who had only broken through 1 of the Supreme Being's shackles? One-on-one. Was there something wrong with Nangong Wuk's head? Although the people in the surroundings felt that it was a pity, they were still somewhat excited. Being able to witness a life and death battle right after entering the city was naturally very attractive. Rustle, the 2 chains behind Nangong Xuanhe swayed unceasingly as they collided with each other, emitting sounds. Nangong Wuk let out a long breath, and his gaze became grave. True energy surged out of his body. In the next instant, the tip of his foot stomped on the ground. They were currently on a small island, and this island was extremely small. When Nangong Wuk stomped his foot, the entire island seemed to tremble. In the next instant, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. In their eyes, Nangong Wuk's figure, which was supposed to be shooting out, suddenly turned around and fled into the distance. It was as though a thunderous explosion had been heard. He fled? Nangong Wuk, where is your face? You still have the cheek to call someone shameless? Everyone was somewhat speechless. How could there be such a person? At first, he acted so righteously as though he wanted to fight Nangong Xuanhe to the death, but in the next instant, he turned around and fled. Looking at Nangong Wuk, who was about to disappear, Nangong Xuanhe let out a long roar in anger. Little bastard, where are you going? If I don't leave, do you think I'm a fool? Nangong Wuk cursed inwardly. He felt somewhat annoyed. Why did he encounter Nangong Xuanhe the moment he entered the secret realm? Even if he had a heaven and earth obsidian flame, he might not be able to defeat Nangong Xuanhe. Now that his heaven and earth obsidian flame had been taken away by Nangong Xuanhe, it was even more impossible for him to defeat him. Many experts from the Lin and Zhang families became interested, and they all chased after Nangong Wuk and Nangong Xuanhe. For a moment, an interesting scene appeared on the small island. A large group of people were chasing after a person. The Cloud Sea secret realm was actually made up of many small islands. Every small island had many terrifying spirit beasts and worldly treasures. This was something that needed to be explored by people. Bang, bang, bang. After exchanging several blows with Nangong Xuanhe, how could Nangong Wuk be a match for him? He felt as though his entire body was about to be torn apart. He lowered his head and gave up on the small island. Instead, he revolved his true energy and charged into the boundless sea. These small islands were surrounded by a dense sea. Nangong Xuanhe chased after Nangong Wuk for tens of miles before he stopped. He let Nangong Wuk, who had turned into a bloody figure, escape. Nangong Wuk coldly snorted and turned around to return to the small island. This wasn't his first time coming here, so he knew how terrifying the vast sea was. Every small island had a spirit boat, and those spirit boats were hidden somewhere on the small island. If they wanted to explore the secret realm, they would have to find those spirit boats. If they rashly charged into the sea, they would be quickly devoured by the boundless sea. This was the experience of his predecessors, and Nangong Xuanhe was very clear about it. Although he wanted to kill Nangong Wuk, he wouldn't choose to throw his life away. A figure drenched in blood streaked across the sky. Nangong Wuk took out a jade bottle and poured the elixirs within it into his mouth. Clutching his chest, he stepped on the waves and continued forward. As his blood dripped into the sea, the dark blue sea surged and swallowed it in an instant. Nangong Wuk gasped for breath as though he was a pair of bellows. His body emitted a burning smell, and a trace of sorrow welled up in his heart. The flame that was burning his body was the heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 9 Hell King flame, which used to belong to him. An indescribable sorrow welled up in his heart, and he coughed out blood once again. His vision became hazy, and he didn't know how long he had been running. Waves surged up to the sky. Nangong Wuk felt that his true energy was depleting rapidly, and the seawater seemed to be unceasingly draining his true energy. Nangong Wuk felt a sense of crisis in his heart. He knew that if he didn't find an island soon, he would soon die in the sea. He would sink to the bottom of the sea and turn into a pile of bones. How King unlucky? He entered the secret realm and didn't do anything. Was he going to die? Nangong Wuk's vision became hazy, and he suddenly sensed something. In his hazy vision, he saw a pitch-black spirit boat slowly moving toward him. As the spirit boat moved forward, the seawater on both sides of the boat was pushed aside. Nangong Wuk felt as though he was grasping at a life-saving straw. He lowered his head and fell toward the pitch-black spirit boat. With a bang, he fell on the deck of the boat and fainted. Bufang held the tiger-head fish in one hand and gnawed on it. He used his other hand to push a brown spirit boat that he found on an island into the sea. Bufang stepped on the ground with the tip of his foot and collected a precious piece of meat from the tiger-head fish. Then, he took a bite of the fish and flew into the brown spirit boat. His true energy surged, and the spirit boat immediately sped forward. Numerous words were engraved on the walls of the spirit boat, and it seemed as though they were introducing the Cloud Sea secret realm. Bufang ate the steaming hot fish as he read the words. Soon, his eyes couldn't help but widen. Chapter 453. There weren't many words written on the spirit boat. It was mainly introducing the Cloud Sea secret realm. However, some of the information caught Bufang's attention. After all, Bufang came to the Cloud Sea secret realm to search for ingredients that could be used to cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. It was also to complete the system's temporary task, which was to find the 10th grade bone metamorphosing dragon grass. There was no need to mention the value of a 10th grade spirit herb. Moreover, the bone metamorphosing dragon grass was an extremely precious 10th grade spirit herb. Originally, Bufang didn't have any clues. He didn't expect that he would be separated from Nangong Wuk after entering the secret realm. However, with the information on the spirit boat, everything became easier. The spirit boat said that if he rowed the spirit boat, he would gradually reach the depths of the Cloud Sea secret realm. He would pass by many islands. There were many islands in the Cloud Sea secret realm. Some of them were dead islands, while some of them were filled with precious spirit herbs and cooking ingredients. This was the magical part of the Cloud Sea secret realm. It was also the reason why the Cloud Sea secret realm attracted so many people. There was an island recorded on the spirit boat. It wasn't an exaggeration to call it an herb garden. The island was filled with spirit herbs. In the boundless sea, the spirit boat slowly floated. Waves of energy were constantly emitted from the back of the boat. It was unknown who made this spirit boat and left it on the island. There was a magic array carved on it. As long as Bufang activated his true energy, it would pass through the magic array and emit waves of energy. These waves of energy pushed the spirit boat forward. Bufang sat cross-legged in the spirit boat, which was not very big, and stared ahead with wide eyes. He was looking for the herb garden island that was described on the spirit boat. According to his understanding, there was a high possibility that a precious spirit herb like the bone-metamorphosing dragon grass was in the herb garden. As long as he found the herb garden, he would be able to find the bone-metamorphosing dragon grass. The spirit boat flew at a high speed. Gradually, it got further and further away from the first island. In the end, it completely disappeared. Nangong Wuk felt as though his entire body was being torn apart. It was extremely painful. He opened his eyes with difficulty and discovered that he was lying on the deck. Deck? Was he on a ship? Nangong Wuk remembered that the last place he had pounced on was a black metal ship. Perhaps he had been lying on it. Nangong Wuk took a deep breath and stood up. He endured the stinging pain and started looking around. Sure enough, they were on a metal ship. The hull of the ship was pitch black, and there were no patterns on it at all. It was black, and it was unknown what kind of metal it was made of. It was incomparably cold, and gave off a sinister aura. The ship had black sails. Every part of the place was filled with strangeness. Nangong Wuk slowly walked forward, squinting his eyes as he wandered around the metal ship. He needed to know what this ship was used for and where it led to. Whoosh! The sound of the seawater hitting the walls of the metal ship was deafening, but the entire ship was still extremely stable. Nangong Wuk felt as if he was walking on flat ground. He found an entrance to the cabin of the ship. The entrance was dark, and a gust of cold wind blew past. It was deep and serene, making one's heart palpitate. Nangong Wuk braced himself and went inside. He didn't know why, but he was suddenly interested in this ship. Once he entered the cabin, it was still pitch black, and he couldn't see anything clearly. This ship was extremely huge, and it was much bigger than an ordinary spirit ship. It was like a small mountain moving slowly on the sea. It was oppressive and heavy. He raised his palm, and a wisp of alchemic fire appeared, illuminating the surroundings. However, when it was illuminated, Nangong Wuk's heart shuddered. He discovered that both sides of the cabin were filled with corpses. These corpses were probably quite old, and their clothes had all turned to dust. Why were there so many corpses in this cabin? Nangong Wuk felt his hair stand on end. He carefully looked around, feeling a little uneasy in his heart. My God! Why is it so gloomy? Don't make trouble, I have beef meatballs. Nangong Wuk felt his heart go numb, and he kept muttering to himself. He took out a beef meatball cooked by Onerbu. The beef meatball was still steaming hot, and it emitted a faint radiance. Suddenly, Nangong Wuk saw a stone tablet in the distance. That stone tablet was erected in the center of the cabin. Nangong Wuk walked over, and his eyes widened as he looked at the stone tablet. Netherworld ship? Nangong Wuk read out the words on the stone tablet, and his heart immediately felt a chill. It invisibly sailed through the sea of clouds, and every time it appeared, it represented disaster, death, and slaughter. It was an ominous symbol. It was a cursed ship. It was a ship so black that it made people's hearts palpitate. Nangong Wuk wanted to cry, but no tears came out. It seemed that he was really unlucky. He thought that he had escaped with his life, but he unexpectedly encountered the Netherworld ship, which was rarely seen in 100 years. Rumble, just when Nangong Wuk was full of regret, the cabin's door was suddenly closed. With a loud bang, it was sealed, and the sound was deafening. Nangong Wuk was startled, and he quickly wanted to leave the cabin. However, he quickly realized that there was no way out. In the darkness, there seemed to be a song quietly drifting over, and it caused people's hair to stand on end. Above the sea of clouds, a fog appeared. Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged in the spirit boat, raised his hand and discovered that a white fog was drifting over, and it enveloped the sea, causing everything to become hazy. The fog was so thick that it was like a curtain, and it covered everything, making it difficult for people to see clearly. It seemed like a ship was slowly sailing over from the left side. That ship was extremely huge, and it was incomparably majestic. It gave people an extremely stifling feeling. It was a completely black metal ship. Under the effect of the fog, the ship's body was faintly discernible, and it was like a ghost on the sea, slowly drifting over. Bufang squinted his eyes, and he looked at the ship slowly sailing past him, and it gradually disappeared into the fog. Bufang took a deep breath, and his heart slightly shook. Could this ship be the netherworld ship that was described on the spirit boat? The metal ship that sailed out of the netherworld, and it represented inauspiciousness and death? The name netherworld seemed a little familiar. Bufang furrowed his brows, but he couldn't recall it at the moment. Looking at the back of the metal ship disappearing, Bufang felt that something was a little strange. Moving forward, clouds and mist rose, and the vague shadow of an island gradually appeared. This seemed to be an extremely huge island, at least much bigger than the island that Bufang had seen for the first time. The spirit boat slowly sailed in, and finally stopped on the shore. Bufang wanted to put the spirit boat into the system's dimensional bag, but he found that he couldn't do it. Thus, Bufang could only pull the spirit boat ashore, and he stopped it on the shore. Then, he walked towards the middle of the island. This island was majestic, and it seemed that he couldn't see the end of it. It gave people a sense of oppression. As for whether it was the Herb Garden Island, Bufang didn't know. However, he still wanted to go in and check. If it was the Herb Garden Island, it would be best. However, looking at the island's appearance, it shouldn't be the Herb Garden Island. How could spirit herbs grow on stones? Without nourishment, how could spirit herbs grow? Bufang stepped out of the small boat, and Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed as he followed behind him. Xiaopi was lying on his shoulder, and everything seemed so peaceful. Looking at a winding path, Bufang stepped into it. Actually, Bufang didn't know that there were many spirit boats around this island. Many people had entered the island through the small path, and it seemed that they would meet soon. After walking on the small path for a long time, Bufang soon entered the darkness. A chilly wind blew in the darkness, and it didn't last for long before he saw the bright entrance. Stepping out of the entrance, what entered his eyes was a sea of light. When Bufang saw the scene in front of him, his eyes shrank, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Because what appeared in front of him was none other than a spirit beast that Bufang was somewhat familiar with. They were the crystal beasts that he had encountered in the crystal mine in the illusory spirit swamp. However, the crystal beasts in front of him were even more terrifying and gigantic than the ones he had encountered in the past. The pressure they emitted made one's heart tremble. 1, 2, 3 There were actually 3 crystal beasts that emitted powerful auras. Moreover, there were also many crystal beasts that emitted weak auras around them. This was a huge concave space. When Bufang saw the crystal beasts, he suddenly realized something. It turned out that this island was actually hiding a huge crystal mine. In the center of the island, which was guarded by 3 crystal beasts that were as big as small mountains, were 3 purple crystal sources that emitted a dazzling radiance. Those 3 crystal sources were extremely alluring, and they attracted everyone's attention. Boom! Boom! What a big crystal source! There must be precious treasures within it. Those crystal sources are mine. All of you die. The essence energy here is so dense. Those crystal sources will surely contain peerless treasures. Waves of excited roars resounded. Deafening noises resounded. That gave Bufang pause. At the same time, many figures rushed out of the entrances around him. The auras of these figures were extremely powerful and terrifying. A dense pressure of heaven and earth spread out. He didn't expect that there would be so many divine realm experts in the surroundings. The pressure of heaven and earth spread out. The slumbering crystal beasts also opened their eyes. A scarlet radiance scattered in all directions. Chapter 454. There was actually such a huge crystal mine on this small island. The 3 glittering crystal sources were like 3 stars in the night sky, and they attracted everyone's attention. Greed appeared in everyone's eyes. The fact that 3 divine realm crystal beasts were guarding the crystal sources was enough to show how precious the items within the crystal sources were. Everyone's heart was stirred. Roars resounded through the air as the experts who had passed through the passageway and entered the crystal mine all shot out toward the crystal sources. Greed was the source of all evil, and their greed finally attracted the attention of the crystal beasts. Rays of scarlet radiance engulfed the entire cave. In the next instant, a storm of energy swept through the cave. The crystal beasts were awakened, and they let out deafening roars. Bang! The experts shot out, and so did the crystal beasts. The 2 parties collided in midair, and a terrifying battle ensued. The speed of the crystal beasts was extremely fast, but the experts present weren't weaklings. Every single one of them had reached the divine physique echelon. For a moment, the 2 sides were evenly matched. Bufang sized up the experts present, and he discovered that he didn't recognize any of them. He didn't choose to attack, and he just watched from afar. All of a sudden, Xiaopi, who was on his shoulder, moved. The little fellow seemed like a cat that had smelled blood. It stood up, and its compound eyes rolled around. It waved its sickle-like claws. It seemed like it was extremely excited. What was going on with this little fellow? Bufang was somewhat astonished and puzzled. When he turned his head to take a look, he discovered that the little fellow's body had already dashed out with a whooshing sound. It turned into a golden thread as it flew toward the location of the 3 crystal sources. Bufang's brows twitched. He wanted to stop it, but it was too late. He could only watch as the little fellow disappeared into the crowd. Bang! A crystal beast that was pouncing toward Bufang was smashed into pieces by Xiao Bai's slap, and it turned into crystals that scattered all over the ground. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered as he stood behind Bufang. He wore a suit of armor, and his round belly was exposed. Buzz, Xiaopi's figure was like a silk thread moving through the void. His speed was so fast that it was difficult to see him with the naked eye. With a swoosh, Xiao Bai appeared in front of a crystal source. Xiaopi's eyes darted around as if it was being summoned by a primal temptation. Xiaopi waved its claws and increased its speed again. He directly drilled into the crystal source, and his body was completely submerged. The surrounding people and crystal beasts were all fighting, so no one noticed this detail at all. However, he didn't notice a little fellow entering the crystal source. They were still fighting in full swing. The fighting strength of the Yuan crystal beasts was rather strong. In just a short while, the cave was filled with a dense stench of blood. The Yuan crystal beasts were also shattered and scattered all over the ground. The battle was extremely fierce, but someone managed to reach the location of the 3 crystal sources and grabbed one of them. The crystal source was very dazzling and eye-catching. After that person put away the crystal sources, he charged toward the exit without looking back. He wanted to escape from this place. The Yuan crystal beasts obviously wouldn't allow him to take away the crystal sources, and they chased after him. The other people also found an opportunity to kill a divine realm Yuan crystal beast and quickly escaped from the cave after grabbing a crystal source. A battle broke out in the cave and spread to the entire island. The last crystal source was extremely dim, and its spiritual energy fluctuations were extremely weak. It was obvious that there wasn't anything good inside it. Those experts weren't fools, and they wouldn't risk their lives to snatch a crystal source that didn't contain anything good. Bufang was somewhat astonished, and he couldn't help but squint his eyes as he looked at the empty cave. A strange expression appeared on his face as he looked at the last crystal source. This was because he discovered that Xiaopi's aura was coming from that crystal source. He remembered that Xiaopi had been extracted from a crystal source. There were 3 crystal sources in that large crystal mine, and one of them gave birth to Xiaopi. As for the last one, it seemed like the lazy Blackie had destroyed it. Bufang wasn't clear about what was inside that crystal source. He only knew that Blackie fell into a deep sleep after eating it. It was as if he had eaten something bad. Xiaopi was actually in the same state this time. What exactly was inside that crystal source? Bufang's curiosity was piqued for a moment. Bufang raised his foot and walked toward the crystal source. The surrounding Yuan crystal beasts widened their scarlet eyes as they stared at Bufang. They roared, and a gust of wind surged forth. The black turtle constellation wok appeared in Bufang's hand. He waved it casually, and the black wok became gigantic and smashed down. Those Yuan crystal beasts weren't divine realm spirit beasts, so they were directly smashed into pieces by Bufang's wok. A loud explosion resounded, and the crystal beasts scattered all over the ground. Bufang grabbed the black turtle constellation wok with one hand, and he leisurely walked toward the crystal source. The crystal source didn't reveal anything, and Bufang curiously sized it up. All of a sudden, the crystal source moved, and a small opening appeared on it. A small head popped out of it, and it was Xiaopi. The opening was very small, and when it opened, a myriad of rays of light shot out of it and soared into the sky. A dense spiritual energy pervaded the air, and there was also an extremely rich fragrance. A steaming hot aroma filled the air. A fragrance? Bufang's eyes widened. There was actually a fragrance within the crystal source? Could it be that a delicious dish was hidden within it? The curiosity in Bufang's heart was about to burst through the sky. Xiaopi, who was drunk, crawled out of the crystal source. His body swayed in the air, and he eventually lay down on Bufang's shoulder. He found a comfortable spot and fell into a deep sleep. Bufang lifted the remaining crystal source, and he felt that it was somewhat heavy. He shook it, and the sound of liquid colliding could be heard. It was obvious that Xiaopi hadn't eaten much, and he was much weaker than Blackie. That dog's appetite was terrifying. Bufang squinted his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He took out a porcelain plate from his system's dimensional storage. He poured out all the liquid within the crystal source. A purplish-black liquid slowly flowed out of the crystal source. It was radiant, and its energy soared into the sky. Gurgle, it was enough to fill a blue and white porcelain bowl. A rich and alluring fragrance wafted out of it, and Bufang couldn't help but approach it to take a whiff. Crystal Source Purple Essence, a 10th grade spirit herb. It's an extremely precious ingredient, and it can help one recover from injuries, increase one's cultivation, and increase the toughness of one's body. It can only be found within the crystal sources of large crystal mines. It can heal mental injuries, and it can help spirit beasts evolve. As Bufang looked at the liquid, the system's introduction resounded in his mind. This is a 10th grade spirit herb? Bufang was dumbstruck, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He didn't expect that he would obtain a crystal source purple essence just like that. Wasn't it said that 10th grade spirit herbs were extremely hard to come by? A fragrant aroma wafted through the air. Looking at the purple liquid in the porcelain bowl, Bufang felt his heart stir. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, and his eyes lit up. He couldn't help but approach it, and he wanted to take a sip. Gurgle. Bufang took a sip, and the crystal source purple essence entered his mouth. Bufang felt as if all the pores on his body were about to explode, and steam was gushing out of them. His eyes instantly became bloodshot. Spicy. It's intense. This was what Bufang felt in his heart. Rather than calling the crystal source purple essence a spirit herb, it would be more accurate to call it wine, or a mixture of wine and sour plum juice. The taste of the crystal source purple essence was extremely similar to that of strong wine, but it also had the sweet and sour taste of sour plum juice. Although it couldn't increase Bufang's cultivation, the spiritual energy seeped into Bufang's body and improved it. It was no wonder that Blackie fell into a deep sleep after eating it. It turned out that the crystal source purple essence could heal mental injuries and help spirit beasts evolve. Bufang smacked his lips and suppressed his urge to take another sip. He stored the crystal source purple essence into the system's dimensional storage. This was definitely a good item, and Bufang couldn't let it go to waste. If it could be slightly processed, it would surely become an extremely precious and fine wine. Outside of the small island, crystal beasts were being beaten to a pulp. An expert, who was bathed in blood, took out a crystal source with a loud roar. He activated his true energy and carefully cut it open. Many experts looked at the expert who had just cut open a crystal source with curiosity in their eyes. They were all curious about how amazing the item was, since it was guarded by a divine crystal beast. However, when the expert cut open the crystal source, he felt so depressed that he almost vomited blood. The crystal source was completely empty, and there wasn't even the slightest trace of a treasure inside. It was a solid crystal source. The other expert who had snatched the crystal source was overjoyed. If the previous expert didn't obtain anything valuable, then the crystal source in his hands would be extremely valuable. He also impatiently cut open the crystal source. This expert was slightly better, and the item he obtained was worth something. However, the value of the item he obtained wasn't directly proportional to the price they had paid. Everyone was dumbfounded. Then, a commotion suddenly broke out. Since the previous two crystal sources didn't contain anything valuable, then, could the good item be in the last crystal source that everyone had forgotten about? Everyone's eyes immediately became bloodshot. They looked at each other and rushed toward the entrance of the cave. A slender and thin figure slowly walked out of the cave. Some people glanced at Bufang in surprise, but they didn't pay him any attention and continued to search for the last crystal source. None of them had expected that they would make an error in judgment. The last crystal source was the most important item. Bufang was puzzled as he looked at the experts who rushed past him like wolves and tigers. He was somewhat dumbfounded. Why did they go back? Bufang was startled. However, he was only startled for a moment. He didn't bother with them and walked toward the exit of the island. He pushed the spirit boat, and it immediately entered the water, creating a huge splash. Bufang sat on the spirit boat and activated his true energy, causing the boat to rush forward. Just as Bufang was about to drive the spirit boat and leave the island, the experts who had rushed back into the cave earlier swarmed out again. They saw Bufang and Bufang's small boat from afar. They all shouted at him. "It's that lad. We mustn't let him escape." The third crystal source was taken by that lad. Rumble! Rumble! For a moment, the sound of spirit boats entering the water rang out, causing Bufang to turn his head in surprise. When he turned his head, his pupils shrank. Countless experts stretched their necks and widened their eyes as they urged their spirit boats to chase after him. Bufang was startled, and he turned his head to increase the speed of his true energy. Are these people retarded? Who are they trying to scare? Chapter 455. Bufang didn't expect that the group of people behind him would become so crazy. The spirit boat sped across the surface of the water at a rapid speed, leaving behind towering waves and surging water vapor. The experts glared at Bufang as they chased after him. They were actually somewhat angry out of humiliation. They felt as if they had been slapped in the face by a ninth-grade supreme being even though there were so many divine realm experts present. This was why they circulated their true energy with all their might in order to obtain the crystal source in Bufang's hand. Even an idiot would know that the crystal source in Bufang's hand was definitely extraordinary. 2 of the 3 crystal sources that were produced in such a huge crystal mine were useless, while the 3rd crystal source contained the essence of the entire mine. Any God Realm expert would be envious of such a thing. Stop right there. Leave behind the crystal source and I will spare your life. A roar echoed out, accompanied by a surge of true energy. A stream of true energy smashed toward Bufang, and its might was extremely terrifying. Bufang wore a calm expression as he looked at the stream of true energy from the corner of his eye. He circulated his true energy, and the spirit boat quickly sped across the surface of the sea. The waves surged up to the sky, and Bufang steadily dodged the terrifying attack. The experts were all infuriated. A supreme being actually dared to challenge their prestige. Numerous streams of true energy shot toward Bufang from behind, and they were so dense that they blotted out the sky and the sun. Bufang's expression became solemn, and his true energy surged out of his body. His control over his true energy was extremely fine, and his control over it was also very strong. Under his control, the spirit boat seemed as if it had a life of its own. Boom, boom, boom. Streams of true energy continuously smashed down, but Bufang was able to dodge them all due to his precise control. These attacks smashed into the surrounding water, causing huge explosions. The seawater splashed down, and it seemed as if it was raining cats and dogs. Bufang's body emitted a hazy radiance which blocked the seawater. For a time, a strange scene appeared on the sea. Numerous spirit boats were chasing after a single spirit boat. That spirit boat was like an extremely nimble fish, dodging left and right, dodging all the attack. Some experts flew into a rage, while others were so depressed that they almost vomited blood. Is this AF** King Supreme Martial Artist? Why was he so difficult to deal with? There was a small island in front of them, vaguely visible in the clouds. Bufang's eyes lit up as he urged the spirit boat to speed toward the small island. The speed was extremely fast, and when it reached the shore, the entire spirit boat seemed to be flying away with a loud bang. Bufang grabbed Xiaopi, somersaulted in the air, and landed steadily. He turned his head and glanced at the group of wolf-like divine realm experts behind him. His brows slightly twitched as he turned around and charged towards the depths of the island. These people's eyes had already turned red. It was better to dodge quickly. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, the spirit boats shot toward the shore like arrows, rumbling as they landed on the beach. Streams of majestic true energy soared into the sky. Then, numerous figures appeared and chased after Bufang. For a fortuitous encounter, everyone would go crazy. Nangong Xuanhe greedily looked at a swaying tree in front of him. That tree was incomparably wide, and it covered the entire sky. Its densely packed branches spread out in all directions, brandishing their claws. Its leaves were lush, and as they swayed, they emitted rustling sounds. The tree emitted a radiance unceasingly. It was unexpectedly a divine realm spirit tree. On top of that spirit tree, there was an extremely beautiful flower. The flower's petals were pink, and as it slowly bloomed, a golden flower bud could be seen floating in the air. A wave of fragrance pervaded the air, causing Nangong Xuanhe's whole body to tremble. This is a 1,000-year-old demonic claw chi tree. It is an extremely precious spirit tree. It blooms every 100 years and bears fruit every 100 years. It is a precious spirit herb that can be used to refine foremark spirit pills. Nangong Xuanhe was extremely excited. He stared at the resplendent flower, and his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Flowers bloomed and wilted in an instant, and this flower was about to wither. The essence within it had already dispersed long ago. Next, the petals withered and a fruit appeared. That fruit was the most important thing, and it was also Nangong Xuanhe's target this time. A gentle breeze blew past, causing the tree's leaves to rustle. The flower's fragrance became very faint, and under Nangong Xuanhe's expectant gaze, the petals finally began to wither, falling off one by one. A fruit, which resembled a bear's paw, appeared on the spirit tree. The fruit was brimming with spiritual energy, and its fragrance permeated the air, intoxicating everyone. It was simply too wonderful. Nangong Xuanhe squinted his eyes and sighed with emotion. All of a sudden, a clamor resounded from afar. Nangong Xuanhe was slightly stunned, and his emotional state was broken by the clamor. A figure dashed out from afar at an extremely fast speed, barging into the crowd. "Who is it?" Nangong Xuanhe was startled, and he immediately shouted, "It's you!" However, in the next moment, his eyes widened, and they were filled with killing intent. Nangong Xuanhe had entered the secret realm, and there were only two people he wanted to kill the most. One was Nangong Wuk, and the other was Bufang. Nangong Wuk escaped in a half-dead state, and he didn't expect that the other person would actually deliver himself to his doorstep. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you chose to stroll through the gates of hell. However, Bufang's calmness exceeded his expectations. He wasn't intimidated by Nangong Xuanhe's imposing manner at all. He continued to move forward at a high speed. He was like an arrow as he flew past Nangong Xuanhe. When Bufang saw the bear's paw-like fruit, he let out a cry of surprise, and a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. Nangong Xuanhe didn't care about whether Bufang was astonished or not. He raised his palm, and the pale white flames turned into a fireball, which shot toward Bufang. It was a heaven and earth obsidian flame, an extremely powerful heaven and earth obsidian flame. Bufang shifted his gaze away from the fruit. He rotated the black turtle constellation Wok in front of him, and the flames collided with the black turtle constellation Wok and dispersed. Bufang shot a glance at Nangong Xuanhe, then looked behind him, and continued dashing forward. Nangong Xuanhe furrowed his brows, and his heart suddenly trembled. His pupils shrank and he looked behind him. What the f***ck? That damned fellow! Nangong Xuanhe was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Nangong Xuanhe's heart sank to the bottom when he saw the numerous divine realm experts appearing before him. His hatred for Bufang was like a raging river, and it was endless. He actually attracted so many divine realm experts. These divine realm experts weren't fools. When they smelled the fragrance, they were all attracted by the bear's paw fruit, a spirit herb that could be used to refine a 4-mark spirit pill. The attraction of the bear's paw fruit wasn't any less than the crystal in Bufang's hand. In an instant, cries of alarm resounded from the crowd. This fruit was discovered by me, Nangong Xuanhe. Whoever dares to take a step forward will be offending my Nangong family. The aura on Nangong Xuanhe's body surged, and 2 pitch-black chains swayed behind him. The aura of someone who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles was fully displayed. However, these divine realm experts didn't care which family they belonged to in front of Benefit. All of them roared as they charged toward the fruit. Their battle cries shook the heavens. Nangong Xuanhe's eyes turned bloodshot, and he attacked brazenly. His surging true energy smashed a divine realm expert, and half of his body was smashed into pieces, causing him to bleed on the spot. In an instant, the smell of blood permeated the entire island. The blood of these experts, who were fighting crazily, dripped onto the ground and was quietly absorbed. The people who were fighting didn't notice anything. Nangong Wuk felt as though his entire body was being suppressed by a mountain, and he found it extremely difficult to breathe. The ship was pitch black, and its cabin was filled with broken bones. A melodious song drifted out from the cabin, and it reached Nangong Wuk's ears, causing his entire body to shiver. Kacha kacha! The sound of something being crushed rang out. Nangong Wuk's heart was in his throat. The netherworld ship seemed to have stopped, and it was very stable. Nangong Wuk was taken aback. Then, he discovered that the cabin's door was suddenly opened. An ice-cold wind blew into the cabin, causing Nangong Wuk's body to shiver. Russell, a pale, sparkling, and translucent foot slowly emerged from the darkness of the cabin, and when it stepped on the ground, it emitted a soft sound. There was actually someone in the cabin? Nangong Wuk didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He widened his eyes as he looked at the enchanting figure that emerged from the darkness. It was obvious that it was a woman. She was graceful, and her long hair reached her waist, swaying slightly. However, her skin was as pale as paper, and Nangong Wuk couldn't sense any signs of life from her body. Could it be that she was already dead? The sparkling foot stepped on the ground, and the graceful figure froze. She stiffly turned her head, and a pair of ice-cold, emotionless eyes fell on Nangong Wuk's body. So terrifying! Nangong Wuk felt as though the blood in his entire body was boiling, and it was about to rush out from under his skin. Suppressing his aura, Nangong Wuk tightly clenched his teeth, and didn't dare to make any movements, as he was afraid of attracting the woman's attention. Tap tap tap, after giving Nangong Wuk a glance, the woman turned her head, and continued to walk out of the cabin. The Netherworld ship stopped in front of the small island that contained the big crystal mine. The woman's graceful figure stood on the deck for a long time. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. Streams of blood energy floated out from the small island, and they looked like threads. These were all the blood of the Divine Realm experts who had fallen on the small island. The blood of those corpses was drawn out, and it floated onto the woman's body, and it unceasingly flowed under her skin. In just a short while, a large amount of blood was completely absorbed. Buzz, the woman let out a shrill cry, as though she was summoning something. The big crystal mine shook, but nothing came out from it. The woman's shrill cry became more and more intense, and it seemed to contain a trace of anger. Rumble! The surrounding waves exploded and rose into the sky. The angry woman's figure flashed, and she fiercely rushed back into the cabin. With a bang, the cabin's door was tightly shut. Nangong Wuk was once again pressed to the ground, and his heart was filled with grief and indignation. What the hell? Bang! When the Netherworld ship slowly left, the whole small island was directly smashed by an invisible force, and it scattered into pieces, floating on the surface of the sea. The Netherworld ship's pitch-black sail swayed, and it slowly sailed forward. Its direction was the small island where the demonic claw owl tree was growing. Chapter 456. Misha, is this the place that we sensed? A figure clad in a blood-red robe calmly asked the person beside him. They were standing on the peak of a mountain on a small island. The center of the mountain was sunken in, and magma was bubbling within it. Gurgling steam rose from the magma and soared into the sky. Dense black smoke was surging violently. Misha's eyes, which were wrapped in a blood-red robe, were deep and profound. His gaze seemed to pierce through the black smoke and stare at the bottom of the magma. That's right, it's here. I can already sense the aura of the Shura Tower. Misha's voice was slightly agitated, and his voice was trembling. The person beside him couldn't help but become excited. The Shura Tower. It was the symbol of their ancient Shura city. If it wasn't broken and scattered across the continent, their ancient Shura city would have become extremely powerful. Their ancient Shura city's strength would definitely become very strong, and they might even be able to compete with the terrifying Colossus, the hidden dragon royal court. Without the Shura Tower, the ancient Shura city could only be considered a first-rate faction. It couldn't be called a peak faction, and many experts from the ancient Shura city felt that it was a pity. Many years ago, something happened that greatly damaged the ancient Shura city's vitality. A section of their Shura Tower was stolen by a disciple. To the ancient Shura city, this was an unforgivable humiliation. The reason they came out this time was to find the Shura Tower. Now that there was some progress, how could they not be excited? But there is magma below us. Is it really alright to jump down like this? What is there to be afraid of? I can feel that there is someone trying to control the Shura Tower under the magma. We must be quick. Otherwise, if the Shura Tower is controlled by someone who isn't from our ancient Shura city, it will be our ancient Shura city's nightmare, Misha said. After he finished speaking, he suddenly jumped up. His blood-red robe fluttered, and his whole body fell into the magma. Rumble! True energy surged and covered the surface of Misha's skin. Misha's body fell into the magma and was swallowed by it. The other person let out a sigh and followed after him. Splat, blood splattered everywhere, and the sky was dyed red. Another Divine Realm expert was killed by Nangong Xuanhe. His chest caved in as he spat out a mouthful of blood and crashed heavily into the ground. Fresh blood flowed out and dripped onto the ground. Nangong Xuanhe's gaze was filled with ruthlessness as he swept his gaze over the experts in the surroundings. These people had merely broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles, yet they actually dared to covet the demonic claw chi fruit that he found. They were simply courting death. Did they really think that he, Nangong Xuanhe, was a sick cat? Nangong Xuanhe slaughtered everyone in his path. His surging killing intent finally caused the people in his surroundings to be afraid of him. The remaining Divine Realm experts looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. They were not only afraid of Nangong Xuanhe, they were also afraid of the people around them. Hence, they stopped their actions without batting an eyelid. The spiritual energy and fragrance in the air were getting thicker and thicker, as if they were about to materialize. The fruits on the Devil's Claw owl tree seemed to be about to fall, as though they were about to ripen and fall. Many people's gazes were filled with greed, and Nangong Xuanhe's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. For alchemists like them, it was difficult to refine good elixirs, but it was also extremely difficult to find the ingredients needed to refine good elixirs. It was extremely difficult to find an ingredient that could be used to refine a 4-mark spirit pill. In Heavenly Pill City, this fruit could be auctioned for a sky-high price. It was also difficult to find it in Heavenly Pill City and Heavenly Shine City. After all, truly good natural treasures were extremely rare. Bufang stood in the distance and didn't make a move. He just watched from afar. He was actually somewhat tempted by the demonic claw chi fruit, and it could be said that he was extremely tempted. He needed to cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, and he couldn't let go of any Divine Realm ingredient. However, he was too lazy to participate in the chaotic battle just now. At this moment, Nangong Xuanhe seemed to have felt that his intimidation had worked, and his gaze unexpectedly turned to Bufang. He had always wanted to kill Bufang, and this was an extremely rare opportunity. He definitely wouldn't let it go. From the looks of it, the fruit wouldn't ripen in a short period of time. If that was the case, why didn't he seize this opportunity to kill the owner of the store? In an instant, Nangong Xuanhe's aura erupted out of his body. His murderous aura instantly locked onto Bufang's body. Rumble! Rumble! The sand and stones on the ground were sent flying, and the entire island seemed to be shaking intensely. Nangong Xuanhe's aura erupted out of his body, and the 2 chains on his back emitted a resounding clanging sound. Bufang furrowed his brows as he looked at Nangong Xuanhe, who was rushing towards him. A cold glint flickered in his eyes. This guy was really courting death. Xiao Bai's eyes flickered with a radiance, and a purple radiance instantly tore through the sky. Buzz, the radiance on Xiao Bai's body became even brighter, and his aura rose steadily. Whitey, who was wearing its armor, took a step forward and charged toward Nangong Xuanhe. Bufang had broken through to the Supreme Being realm. With Xiao Bai's current battle prowess, he could fight against an expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. Rumble! A cold glint flickered in Nangong Xuanhe's eyes. He curled his palm, and his true energy soared into the sky as he exchanged a blow with Xiao Bai. The experts in the surroundings wore mocking smiles on their faces. They looked down on Nangong Xuanhe, and they also didn't have a good impression of Bufang, who had attracted them here. If it wasn't for Bufang, they wouldn't have encountered Nangong Xuanhe, and they wouldn't have experienced such a huge battle. Moreover, it seemed like Bufang still had a crystal source in his hand. It was the crystal source that contained the most precious treasure. An intense explosion resounded, and shock waves spread out in all directions. Nangong Xuanha's pupils shrank, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. His entire body was sent flying in the sky, and he tumbled a few times before landing on the ground. Was that a freaking puppet? It was unexpectedly a puppet that could contend against an expert who had broken through 2 of the Supreme Being's shackles. What kind of monster was that? Could it be that the kid in front of them was one of the puppet sex higher-ups? Impossible. The puppet sex members were extremely sinister, and their auras were completely different from this kid's. Moreover, the style of the puppet sex puppets was completely different from this lump of metal. A magic array flickered on Xiao Bai's body, and the metallic wings on his back suddenly unfurled. The oppressive aura emanating from him caused the expressions of many people to change drastically. This was especially the case for Nangong Xuanha. If that puppet's battle prowess was really that strong, then it might really be able to snatch the demonic claw chi fruit from him. Damn it! I was almost tricked by that kid. Nangong Xuanha was extremely angry, and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. Fortunately, he had discovered that kid's plot in advance. Suddenly, the spiritual energy in the surroundings started to boil, and it seemed like a huge change had occurred. A loud explosion resounded, and the demonic claw chi fruit started to tremble intensely. It emitted a dazzling radiance, and it started to fall to the ground. Everyone's aura surged as they stared at the fruit, and there seemed to be a flame burning in their hearts. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. All of them rushed toward the demonic claw chi fruit. There was only one fruit, and everyone wanted to participate in the fight for it. Xiao Bai also joined the fray. Many divine realm experts emitted their true energy and rushed toward the dazzling fruit. This scene was extremely shocking. However, unlike the others, Bufang's heart couldn't help but palpitate. He stood on the small island and he surveyed the distant sea. The sea seemed to emit an angry roar, and it started to surge. Waves surged up to the sky, and they seemed like dragons. What was going on? The surrounding sea seemed to be restless. It was completely different from the previous tranquility, and it seemed like a terrifying existence was about to emerge from the vast sea. The surrounding people were all immersed in the fight for the demonic claw chi fruit, and they didn't notice the abnormality in the surrounding sea. However, Bufang felt somewhat restless. He couldn't explain why he felt so restless. Suddenly Bufang's pupils shrank. He narrowed his eyes and he looked toward the distant sea. There was a huge black ancient ship that was slowly sailing out of the surging wave. The surrounding waves were clamorous and surging, but that ancient ship was incomparably calm. It broke through the waves and slowly moved forward. The pitch-black ancient ship emitted an extremely sinister aura. Wherever it passed, everything became pitch-black. The sail swayed slightly and made a rustling sound. Swish! Bufang suddenly felt a little pain on his skin. The blood under his skin seemed to be boiling, and it seemed like it was about to rush out of his skin. Strands of blood floated up from the ground, gathering toward the black ancient ship, and finally seeping into it. The pitch-black ancient ship became even more demonic. Boom! The moment the black ancient ship landed, the battle for the demonic claw chi fruit finally broke out. Surging true energy shot up into the sky like a tornado, sweeping the entire sky. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.